Rishi Sunak pledges to fix Liz Truss's mistakes as he assembles his cabinet.
A very good morning. It's 6 o'clock on Wednesday, the 26th of October. This is Breakfast on GB News today with Paul and me, Rosie. Well, here's what's leading the news.
Yeah, Rishi Sunak vowing to fix the mistakes of the previous government in his first speech as PM. Yesterday, he assembled a new cabinet that saw many ministers keep their roles from the previous government.
Sunak will face off against the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, in the Commons at midday today in his first Prime Minister's questions.
Also this morning, dock workers at one of the UK's largest container ports kick off 2 weeks of strikes today after talks collapsed in chaos. The industrial action at the port of Liverpool is likely to further disrupt the country's supply chain.
And there's a difference between being difficult and being clear. Meghan Markle speaks out about those Buckingham Palace accusations and her dictatorial behaviour towards staff.
Remember, you can get in touch with a lot of the conversations we're going to be having this morning. Particularly, we're interested to hear from you on Suella Braverman. Was Rishi Sunak right to bring her back as Home Secretary? Very controversial reappointment. GB Views at gbnews.uk or at GB News.
So a very good morning. And to our top story, Rishi Sunak has used his first speech as Prime Minister to pledge that he's going to fix the mistakes of Liz Truss's premiership and restore integrity to the government.
I want to pay tribute to my predecessor, Liz Truss. She was not wrong to want to improve growth in this country. It is a noble aim. And I admired her restlessness to create change.
Well, the Prime Minister's new cabinet assembled yesterday and it includes many of the same faces you'll recognise from the previous one.
The Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, stays in cabinet. The Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, also stays there.
And controversially, the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, has been reappointed. Now, you'll remember, she was forced to resign and admitted breaching the ministerial code just days ago, but is now back in the cabinet.
Sunak will face his first public challenge today when he goes head-to-head with Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer at PMQs.
Of course, we'll bring that to you here on GB News, but let's get some analysis of the political turnout and fallout. Priya Minhas is a senior research manager at Opinion Polling and joins us in the studio. Thank you very much for joining us. So this is a chance, and Rishi Sunak was saying, look, we've got to unite or die. He's pulled together his cabinet. Are they going to be one that can restore confidence in not only just the party, but the public?
So currently in the polls, we can expect to see improvements in public perceptions of the Conservatives. I think we've got to first look back at Liz Truss. People will be comparing Rishi Sunak and his government to her government, and she reached an approval rating of 7%, which is difficult to do worse than. Rishi Sunak was also the preferred choice among the public for who they thought the Conservative Party should choose as leader. The public do want to see stability, and I think a cabinet that he's put together that does appear to be one where he's focused on unity is a good chance to portray that. At least we'll have to see. It's very early days whether that's maintained, but unity is really important for the public in terms of making them feel more stable and having increased confidence in this government.
Yeah, yesterday, at the beginning of his speech, he was very quick to say mistakes were made yesterday, and on the face of it, that seemed like quite an honest assessment. Mistakes were made, but actually it's about distancing himself from Liz Truss, because the narrative from Labour will be, this is continuity. You were with Boris Johnson. You're part of this mess.
Exactly. And I think one good thing that we've seen in the polls for the Conservatives is that the public are more likely to place that blame for what happened with the fallout of the mini-budget on Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng, rather than the Conservative Party as a whole. So the fact that Rishi Sunak did distance himself so much is a good thing. And the fact that he was so far removed from Liz Truss's government does mean that he can provide that confidence to the public. And you can see that in the fact that he was the person that the public preferred over Liz Truss of the candidates that were put forward over the weekend.
Normally, when someone becomes Prime Minister, they get this sort of honeymoon period, don't they? A little bit of time where the public think, let's see what they can do. Is Rishi Sunak actually even going to be afforded that?
I think he will be for a while. I think a key group we are going to be looking at are Conservative 2019 voters, because at the moment 30% of them are saying that they would vote for Labour. I think they will give Rishi Sunak a chance. You see that a lot in focus groups when a new Prime Minister comes in. Floating voters and past voters that have moved away often do give a new Prime Minister a chance, and I think they will want to give Rishi Sunak that chance.
There's quite a lot of anger, though, among the Conservative Party membership at what happened with was Boris Johnson going to run for it or not? And just in our inbox yesterday, people really angry saying, Boris had the mandate, he should have gone for it. Do you have any sort of indication on how things might have gone if Boris had gone forward?
He was deeply unpopular with the public. So while he was more popular amongst the Conservative membership base than Rishi Sunak, I think in the long run that wouldn't have been good for the party, because they have to, they will want to win the next election. And I think Rishi Sunak gives them a better chance of that than Boris Johnson would have done.
Interesting times. Priya, thank you for speaking to us. We'll be talking about how Rishi Sunak has been received in the UK. What about on the world stage?
Well, in the US, President Joe Biden reacted to the news, as you would expect, although the mispronunciation of the new Prime Minister's name was a little off. If you haven't seen it yet, this is what he said.
And whether it's the United Kingdom or just today, we've got news that Rishi Sunak is now the Prime Minister. As my brother would say, go figure.
Well, joining us now to take a closer look at our new Prime Minister's reception at home and across the world is Diana Fergentot-Roth. Thank you very much for joining us. Economic advisor to Ronald Reagan and also George W. Bush, as well as former Assistant Secretary of Transportation for the Trump administration. Does President Biden take us seriously when he said there, go figure?
Well, it's not clear that he takes anyone seriously, Rosie, and he did interfere by criticising Prime Minister Liz Truss right at the very beginning. But he probably is not taking this very seriously. He is focused on the midterm elections, the first week in November in the states where his party, the Democrats, might lose their majorities in both the Senate and the House of Representatives, which would be a big slap in his face. So that's probably what he's focused on.
Yeah, I mean, has there been any focus then in the United States on the way Britain has handled its economy in the past 6 weeks?
I think that President Biden, is much more aligned with the Labour Party than the Conservative Party. He probably is not cheering for Prime Minister Sunak to be winning and to see Britain as strong, because that, again, is a counterbalance to his Democrat Party in Washington.
Do you think Biden will be a bit embarrassed by getting that name wrong, or will he just brush it off?
He'll probably just brush it off because he gets names wrong all the time. If you look at the White House transcripts of what he says, it's full of mistakes. It's because he's going to be 80. A number of years ago, he had a stroke. Everybody admits he's not what he used to be.
Yeah. And clearly Rishi Sunak wants to be a tax cutter, but there may have to be tax rises in this parliament. How would that be received in the US?
Well, I think that it's very, very important to have incentives for growth, but also important to cut spending at the same time. The United States has a massive budget deficit. The president goes spending 350 billion pounds just writing off people's student loans. The deficit is completely out of control in the States, and it's a big warning here in Britain that Britain should not go the same path.
Yeah. And what is the state of the special relationship at the moment, especially given it's hard to have a relationship with someone over 45 days?
Yes, well, I think that the special relationship between the British public and the American public will always be there, in spite of President Biden mispronouncing Prime Minister Sunak's name on the first day.
But when we say this special relationship, what does that actually mean? What does it look like?
Well, what it should look like is a trade deal, because now that the UK, now that Brexit is finished, one of the first things that Rishi Sunak should be doing is focusing on trade relationships with different countries, including the United States. That would be beneficial to both countries. And I think it would be very important to do that. And there are many people in the States who want to do that also.
Yeah.
Rishi Sunak does seem to have stabilised the pound for now. Are you encouraged by this change of leadership at the Conservative Party?
Well, I think that he is a very serious, a very, very competent person. And I think that what the markets did reflected their view of his competence rather than what he has done right away. And so it remains to be seen in the weeks to follow whether the markets stay stable.
What do you think Rishi Sunak should do to really sort of embolden and secure those international relationships in his first few weeks?
He should make outreach to the different groups who also want to have trade deals with the UK, try to cement some of those deals, because that will be an incentive to growth, not just here, but also in those other countries. The global stage looks very bad economically right now because of the high energy prices, high government spending, and we do need leaders who will address it.
Really good to talk to you this morning. Thanks so much for coming in, Diane. Really good to
Thank
see
you.
It is 11 minutes past 6. Let's bring you up to date with what else is happening this morning.
Well, the new Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, has held talks with the First Ministers of Scotland and Wales. While speaking with Nicola Sturgeon and Mark Drakeford, Sunak is said to have emphasised the UK's shared challenges, concluding that talks had been constructive.
Around 7 in 10 NHS trusts are failing to meet their targets for cancer referrals. In England, the current maximum wait time for a hospital appointment for suspected cancer is 2 weeks. NHS England says 93% of patients should be seen within this time frame, but the latest data shows this target is routinely not being met. We'll have more on that after 7.
Northern Ireland businesses are facing what they've described as a tipping point, with 1 in 5 businesses reportedly struggling. The president of the Northern Ireland Chamber, Gillian McCauley, has called this week pivotal in ending Stormont's political stagnation. Well, it comes as the Northern Ireland Secretary has warned that he'll call General Assembly elections if Stormont is not restored by Friday.
Have you ever had a Ford Fiesta?
I learnt to drive on a Ford.
Wow.
A
Fiesta.
not a Fiesta, but a really, really old beaten up Ford that was so, it was so well loved, shall we say, that I was driving once and the indicator came off in my hand. It really was ropey, but a brilliant car to learn on. But sad news for the Ford Fiesta.
Yeah, apparently it's Ford is going to stop producing the Fiesta after 46 years. It's going to scrap the Fiesta. New models are expected to be withdrawn from sale within a year. It sold 4.8 million Fiestas in 46 years, but that is the end of it.
And amazingly, it has been a bestseller every year, held the top spot between 2009 and 2020. So for 11 years, it was the most popular car to drive around. For no more.
Yeah, no more Fiestas. Do let us know if you have any Ford Fiesta-related memories this morning. There's one. That's quite an old one, isn't it? In fact, it's 1976. Right, OK, interesting. Since 1980, the Fiesta has appeared in the top 5 bestsellers every year. But clearly it was on sale before 1980, given that picture there.
Launched in 1976, apparently.
Wow.
An icon, really. Well, if you drove one, or if you will be sad to see them off our streets, those new ones being produced, please do get in touch this morning. gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Yes. And as they say, other cars are available. Hundreds of dock workers at the Port of Liverpool have begun another round of strike action in a dispute over pay. Staff also walked out back in September, but no agreement was made.
Well, our North West of England reporter, Sophie Reaper, has this story from the picket line.
One of the busiest container ports in Northern Europe, brought to a standstill by the latest round of dock strikes. Workers at the Port of Liverpool have come together to demand a wage increase in line with the rise in inflation, but so far a deal is yet to be struck.
This is a profitable company, and we believe, like other workers in the country, we're facing the cost of living crisis like everybody else, and we want a fair deal for our members.
The Port of Liverpool is run and operated by Peel Ports, who last week reported they had offered their workers an 11% pay rise. That would be the highest percentage increase of any port group in the UK.
Peelport's press statement is a complete misrepresentation of the deal that was put to us. There are 3 groups on strike here. 2 of them have been offered 9%. The other group that Peel claim is 11% offer is actually 9.2% and a one-off payment.
What would it take for the workers to go back to work?
Well, I believe if Peelport's made an offer of 11% like the claiming they have, I think that would be the basis of an acceptable deal.
There are, of course, 2 sides to every story, and strikes are now going to continue here at the Port of Liverpool for the next 2 weeks. That's unless Peelports will offer the dock workers a rise in pay that they deem to be acceptable.
In a statement, Peelports have said the latest 2-week strike will cause yet further damage to our customers, the business and the Liverpool City region, threatening even more jobs at the port. It's wholly irresponsible of Unite to prolong this self-defeating strike. And so, for now at least, it seems negotiations at the Port of Liverpool remain as unmoved as the shipping containers, with its workers prepared to be on strike for the long haul. Sophie Reaper, GB News.
How long will that long haul be? That's, with many of these strike disputes, the big question. Well, don't go anywhere. After the break, Kinsey Schofield will be live from LA, bringing us revelations from Meghan Markle's latest episode in her podcast. That's after the weather.
Good morning, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest broadcast from the Met Office. Wednesday, sunny spells, scattered showers, blustery winds, but very mild for the time of year. Looking at the pressure pattern, and low pressure still dominates our weather as we move through the next few days, drawing in warm air from the near continent, but tightly packed isobars indicate quite brisk winds at times, particularly over the next 24 hours. So a gusty start to the day. Wednesday morning, sunny spells, scattered showers pushing their way north and eastwards, but it should slowly become a bit drier as we head through the morning. There will be a few scattered showers around, perhaps heavy at times, but most places staying dry. A blustery afternoon though, winds still gusting around 40-45 miles an hour around some western coasts. But a southerly direction with those winds means another warm day, 15, 16, 17 in the north, 18 to 20 Celsius across southern parts. So exceptionally mild for the time of year. Through into the evening, we'll see a few showers around, plenty of clear spells initially. Still very windy across the far northwest of Scotland, outbreaks of rain here. And then overnight, we'll see thicker clouds, some patchy rain starting to push northwards. This will stop the temperatures from dropping too low. Again, 12 to 16 Celsius for many. The average should be around 6 or 7, so a warm night to come. Thursday morning, quite a cloudy start, perhaps some sunny spells for Northern Ireland, southern Scotland initially, but patchy cloud and rain will push its way northwards through the day. The wind should ease as the day goes on, perhaps still a little blustery around the coast. And there will be some drier, brighter interludes at times, particularly across the south and the east. And where we see any spells of sunshine, it will lift temperatures into the low 20s, 21 Celsius possible, but mild for everyone, 15 to 17 Celsius, normally 14 or 15 as a high at this time of the year. It stays similar as we move towards the end of the week into the weekend, further blustery rain at times, and temperatures staying on the mild side. See you again soon.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other pay-per-review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Welcome back. Good to have you with us this morning. It is 6:20. Still to come on the programme.
New data reveals 7 in 10 NHS trusts are failing to hit their cancer referral targets. We're going to be asking a cancer specialist why that delay clearly is so dangerous.
Peter Tatchell has been released after being arrested in Qatar for staging a protest against the Gulf states' criminalisation of LGBT people. We'll hear from one of his friends at 7:45.
And lots of you getting in touch about the new cabinet. Please add your voice. GBviews at gbnews.uk. Do you have confidence in the new cabinet and the new Prime Minister? You can tweet us too at GB News.
Another week, another Meghan Markle podcast revelation, and this time the Duchess of Sussex has spoken out about the previous accusations made by Buckingham Palace.
Well, entitled Angry Black Women, Meghan admitted to being particular and said that she often felt herself cowering and tiptoeing into a room, adding that she was not demanding or difficult. Well, we'll let you come to your own conclusions. This is what she had to say.
I'm particular. I think a high tide raises all ships, right? Yeah. Stop whispering and tiptoeing around it. Just say what it is that you need. You're allowed to set a boundary. You're allowed to be clear. Yep. It does not make you demanding. It does not make you difficult.
Well, for more on the Sussex's latest moves, we're joined by showbiz reporter Kinsey Schofield. Morning to you, Kinsey, or evening where it is where you are. Just tell us a little bit more about what she had to say.
Yeah, I think, Paul, Rosie, this seems really transparent that she's utilizing American media. She's utilizing this podcast to respond kind of vaguely to accusations that both Tom Bauer and Valentine Lowe have made against her in their recent books. She wants you to know that she's not a bully. She's just an assertive woman. And it's like Rosie said, you're going to have to come to your own conclusion on whether or not that's the truth. But she's clearly utilizing this podcast as a vehicle to respond to some of those accusations in a way that's not as blatant as a sit-down Oprah interview, but she's, trying to paint a picture of who she wants the world to see her as through this podcast. And, she also said that she's 43% Nigerian, so that was, news to us. And, utilizing some of these bigger stars and celebrities to elevate herself.
To some people will say, amplify her voice further. The strategy she's trying to use to sort of reset the narrative and define herself, who she wants to be seen as, is that working in the States? Are people sort of favourable towards her?
Rosie, not really. I have to be honest with you. If you look at the numbers, her podcast, that very first episode, it blew up. I think people were very curious. But lately, Kim Kardashian's beating her on the Spotify charts. There's a less and less interest in her. And I think that American media has noticed this redirection in the narrative. And it's, I think we're pleasantly surprised that she's complaining less, but it's also coming off as insincere because it's such a 180.
And just quickly, Prince Harry as well, Harry, has been offering some business advice. Just tell us what that is and why he thinks he's got the credibility to give it.
Yeah, so this is a Better Up summit in San Francisco, talking to CEOs, telling them that they should work on themselves, work on their personal growth, but also encourage the people beneath them to nurture their own personal growth. And I really do think that this is actually the direction we're going to see his book when that inevitably comes out. I think he's setting himself up to be that thought leader, that guy that gets paid a lot of money to do these kind of conferences. Also, happy belated birthday, Rosie. I'm sorry I missed it yesterday.
Well, it was a sort of very, very belated celebration of an excited birthday early on in the year. Can we just ask you really quickly while you're here? Lots of people have been sort of a bit surprised, amused, but also a bit alarmed at watching President Joe Biden mispronounce the new Prime Minister's name. How's it gone down over there?
We are can I just apologize on behalf of the United States of America? That was so cringeworthy. I've sent that clip to everybody saying, are you kidding me? I mean, Rishi Sunak is a name that we should everybody should know in the United States just because of his former positions and the fact that he was up against Liz, just a few months ago. So I'm so sorry. That's so embarrassing. And I cannot, I'm sure that the president will come out and try to make a joke out of it. Also, what does go figure mean? Was that what he said? Didn't he say something like I didn't even get the joke.
Yeah, he said go figure at the end. It was like, figure what? Do you know what he meant by that?
I don't know. I'm so sorry. I have no idea. Let the guy take a nap or something because clearly his batteries are running low.
Kinsey, thank you very much for joining us this morning, giving us a roundup from politics to also celebrity and former royals. Really appreciate your time.
It's not a particularly difficult name. It's 4 syllables. 2 syllables per word. Rishi Sunak.
But I think that isn't the worst part. I think we all make mistakes. Like, we sit behind this desk and there will very rarely be a programme without something coming out, maybe not exactly as we'd intended.
Yeah.
But to then say go figure and sort of make a bit of a mockery of it, maybe it is laughable. Maybe because of how much turmoil there has been, that is how we're to be viewed.
It'll be interesting to see how it goes when he meets him at the G20 in Indonesia next month. We're also talking, of course, about Rishi Sunak's cabinet reshuffle. Controversially, Suella Braverman brought back into the cabinet. He's made her Home Secretary less than a week after she resigned for a security breach. Lots of you getting in touch with us about that this morning.
Yeah, Ian says, well, she was not sacked. She resigned after confessing she broke ministerial rules. Well, that's right. The question some people are having is if Sunak says, I'm going to lead with honesty and integrity, why would you bring someone back who had admitted to breaking the code?
Yeah, and Frank says 100% correct to bring Suella back. She seems to be honest when she said that she had serious doubts about the cabinet not implementing the immigration policy. Rishi Sunak very vocally supporting that Rwanda policy during the leadership contest in August. So it'll be interesting to see where the party goes now, where Rishi Sunak takes the government's immigration policy. Now he's brought Suella Braverman back into the fold. It is 6:27. Coming up, we'll go through the papers with Muldoon and Mellor, M&M as we're calling them. We'll lose ourselves in the papers. Next.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akua, on Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News.
On Mark Dolan tonight, we have a simple plan, which is to inform, stimulate and entertain in equal measure. It's all about getting your opinions on the national television airwaves. I love my viewer emails, mark@gbnews.uk.
So do join me from 9 p.m. to midnight every Friday, Saturday and Sunday for big guests, big opinions and a big presenter. 6'5", don't you know? See you then on GB News.
It's 6:30. Welcome back to Breakfast here on GB News. Time to go through the papers. Joining us to do it is former Home Minister David Mellor and broadcaster Claire Muldoon. A very good morning to both of you.
Morning.
I know we're sort of itching to get into the characters in the cabinet, David. Why don't we start with the Times? And Rishi says, mistakes were made, I'll fix them.
Yeah, well, he has to say that, doesn't he? Whether he will be able to do it. I certainly think he's a better chance of fixing things than his predecessor. The cabinet is interesting because, you know, there was a moment that defined Liz Truss's premiership right from the start. You remember when she was called up to the stage and they read out the result, she stalked off, and instead of going over to Rishi Sunak, giving him a hug and saying we'll be working together, she just ignored him. And, you know, you can run a party that way, but it's not wise. And what he seems to want to do is to reach out to all sections of the party, and he's deliberately left in people like James Cleverly, for instance, who was a big Boris supporter, has kept, to some people's surprise, including my own, nice guy though he is, has kept the job of Foreign Secretary. What he wants to do is try and make people feel that their previous convictions are not going to be held against them. And, you know, the Tory party is not so over-endowed with talent. It can afford to keep some of the better people on the back benches just because they didn't support the right candidate for leadership.
Does that include Suella Braverman?
Well, you see, you will be surprised at my response to this. Having been a Home Office Minister for 5 years, I have a lot of sympathy with her because I got sick of the Priti Patel talking a good game but never playing that game. I think Braverman is quite a sharp person. And also, there are various sins you can commit as a minister. She was clumsy, perhaps, in a way she sought advice from experienced colleagues about how that statement was going to sound. Remember, they were having a row about whether or not we should loosen immigration rules in order to bring in more people from overseas to work in the British economy. I didn't see it as a mortal crime, you know, a mortal sin. I saw... And I
breaching
think,
the ministerial code?
Yes. Well, you can breach the ministerial code by going up and murdering the Prime Minister or by probably, you know, putting salt in his coffee. I mean, I think that what you have to look at is the gravity of it. So, you know, I find myself in the unusual position, probably regarded as someone who always has a go at people. Well, I try and have a go at the right people. I would like to see Suella Braverman having a go at doing a job that was plainly beyond Priti Patel.
It was completely beyond Priti Patel. I mean, she was disastrous, a disaster appointment. I do have a lot of time for Suella Braverman, but you know, the public will not forget that she only resigned, 6 days ago because of breaching the ministerial code. But there's part of me that actually thinks she did that deliberately just to get, you know, by sending that email. It was nothing majorly, it was nothing grave, there was no disaster because she did, there was no risk to security or anything. And
it's
yet,
about immigration policy.
It was the email that was sent from a personal email account. So you would think on one hand, well, really, was that really much of a thing? And then on the other, well, she came out and admitted it. But I think she did it because she wanted out of Truss's government.
And she potentially wanted to help facilitate the pulling down of Liz Truss.
Well, you know, politics is such a cesspit at the moment, and it's disgusting. And, you know, to be honest with you, every other country in the world is probably looking at Britain right now and going, what an absolute disaster.
Well, actually, on that note about how we're viewed on the world stage, I believe, David, you wanted to talk about Joe Biden's pronunciation of Rishi Sunak and what he had to say. Let's have a look.
And whether it's the United Kingdom or just today, we've got news that Rishi Sunak is now the Prime Minister. As my brother would say, go figure.
See,
what does he mean?
What does he mean by that?
I mean, first of all, Sunak sounds like the star of an Eskimo cowboy, you know, and you think Sunak. But what does go figure? I was actually in the process of trying to look it up on Google, and we were called in here. But I guess go figure means work it out. Yeah. But what are you supposed to work out? Are you supposed to work out good things like Sunak? I was going to call him Sunuk. Oh God, it'll become a habit with me now. Sunak becoming, the first person of Asian origin who becomes Prime Minister. Great achievement. Congratulations.
He did say, to be fair, look, if we ran that clip on a bit longer, he did say it was a significant moment.
Yes, I think he probably...
So I think it's more a commentary on the fact we've changed Prime Ministers.
I think it's about the turbulence that there's been in politics, that we're now on our third Prime Minister, countless numbers of chancellors. Claire, it doesn't look great, though. There's supposed to be a special relationship brewing between these two men.
Well, I don't think there's a special relationship between... I think the only relationship Biden has is with himself and his memory or loss or lack of. I think that needs to be restored. I mean, the man's nearly pushing 80 and he doesn't seem to know his own name, let alone the name of the new Prime Minister of Britain. But that's something The Guardian has picked up on today, and they're calling it the Obama moment. And, you would think that, for me, I don't care about the race, creed, religion of anybody as long as they're fit to do the job.
Did it feel like an Obama moment?
Well, I don't know, because I'm not an American. I don't know. I don't
You saw it happen on TV, didn't you?
Yes,
2008 and,
Yeah, but I think that was a much bigger thing then. And I think, hopefully, the world has moved on.
Yeah.
Who cares?
Well,
as long as they're fit to do the job, then that's good enough for me. And let's be honest, we've had a few that haven't been, and look what's happened.
Yeah. But, I mean, I think it's a terrible thing that at a time when the world faces the threat of an increasingly deranged Putin and the obvious threat of Xi Jinping, who is Mao, and Mao was, a very bad person. And I think that it's going to become very difficult to deal with Xi Jinping. We have a man as limited as Biden, and I think the Americans will have reason to be embarrassed that he is president, because he's plainly not on top of the job.
Yeah, well, yeah, the smart money's on him losing control of the House.
Yeah, and maybe the Senate as well.
Senate,
and that's when he's got real problems, and it makes our little local difficulties look nothing very significant.
Yeah. So that'll be interesting to see how that pans out. Claire, leave it to me, Your Majesty. On the front page of the Mail.
Every single newspaper, apart from The Sun, is covering, and I think The Independent as well, The Eye, are covering this meeting, this fantastic meeting of the new Prime Minister with King Charles III. And the statements, leave it to me, Your Majesty. I doubt very much if he actually did say that. So, King Charles, since he's been... the coronation hasn't happened yet, but since he's become king, he's now welcomed, of course, the second Prime Minister of this country. I wonder what he's thinking. He's probably thinking, God, I didn't want to leave Balmoral, but I had to come down and do this. What's going to happen? And we see the figure of Rishi Sunak there, shaking hands with King Charles III, and we're wondering what's going to happen. And do you know what? I think it's actually a really, really nice picture. And I think Rishi Sunak will do well, but what I want to concentrate on are his grey hairs at the moment. Fast forward 3 months' time, if this picture were to be taken again, I think we'll see a lot more of those than anything.
Well, you certainly inherited a very...
It's all right to have a few greys, isn't it, David?
Well, I don't know.
Yeah. You picked them up in the Major government, didn't you?
I'm sure I picked them up when I was about 10.
David, Sunak's now got the team around him, and the Times are talking about the fact Rishi's keeping friends close, enemies closer. Yeah. What do you think of, you've sat in a cabinet before, the makeup of it? How important is it to have people who are going to challenge you as well?
Yeah, you have to be able to do that, because if they don't challenge you inside and get a fair hearing, they'll challenge you outside. Because, you see, the interesting thing, for instance, they all look back to Margaret Thatcher, and I can look back to Margaret Thatcher, having known her very well. I've been a member of her government for 9 years. The first thing about Thatcher is, however much she may have privately despised, and she did, those Conservatives who didn't agree with her, she always offered them jobs. Anyone who was a serious figure in the party would get a job. So the 4 people who ran against her when she ran and first became leader of the opposition, as it then was, all 4 of them got a job. And I think that this was obviously something that Truss didn't understand, Boris Johnson didn't understand. You know, the Tory party has not got so much talent it can afford to leave good people on the back benches just because they didn't vote for you in a leadership contest.
Are you surprised that Penny Mordaunt didn't get more of a promotion?
No, I'm delighted.
Why?
Because, look, Penny Mordaunt has a very high opinion of herself. And I'm not sure that high opinion is justified by anything she's so far achieved. Look, I can tell you, I don't know what...
She rallied quite a lot of support quite quickly.
Well, we don't know about
both
that.
the leadership
We
contests.
don't know how well she actually did. But the answer is the fact that she didn't get to 100 votes was a good thing for the Tory party. I reckon if she got 101 or 102, she would have insisted on an election. Now, this is not Penny Mordaunt putting the party first. This is Penny Mordaunt putting Penny Mordaunt first. I think
that's the political MO. I think a lot of politicians just put themselves
No, I
first.
think anyone with any sense of long-term respect for themselves and for the Tory party would not have prolonged this agony. And I personally think, look, Penny Mordaunt at the end of the day has held a number of junior jobs. She was a cabinet minister for 7 weeks. She needs to go and prove herself by working hard in a department and making that department work. The idea that Penny Mordaunt is a finished product capable of being Prime Minister, and what one needs to remember is what Lord Frost said about her. You know, I think Lord Frost, because he came in from diplomacy and all that, he hasn't quite become a sort of archetypal politician. He asked for her to be moved from his department because he didn't think she was up to it. That's a very interesting
But you say that. Grant Shapps has been brought in again after, you know, transport was a bit of a disaster, and then...
His stint as Home Secretary was successful, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, 4 days, you didn't have time to mess it up, did
Yes.
you? But,
So, come on, it's not just about... it's not a women thing either. It's just that the
No,
best
we're not,
people
hey,
for the
don't
jobs.
introduce women. It's not a woman thing. I would say the same if she was some bald, horrible man like a lot of the rest of the cabinet are. The point I'm making is that there is no reason for her to think that she's anything special. There's nothing in her record that makes her anything special. What she is vocal, and to be leader of the House of Commons, you've got to be vocal. But there's no evidence. She's never run a great Department of State, and I think what she should now do is settle down and run a great department.
Well, she certainly did persuade MPs who were prepared to back her publicly. Someone who's decided right now is not the time. It's the front page of The Sun, Claire. At least I got rid of the other Mog, Larry. And that means Jacob Rees-Mogg has said, not for me.
Yeah.
That was the right decision.
Absolutely for him. I mean, he just needs to go back to Somerset and be the MP that he is and just do that. Someone made a quip yesterday. He's gone home to count his money or something like that. That'll soon tire him out. This isn't about, you know, I think his position was untenable because he was such a Boris supporter. And I don't think Rishi Sunak could have had that high level of support for Boris in his cabinet. Whereas, you know, he has brought in Dominic Raab, who was a vociferous supporter of himself, of Sunak. But one interesting thing I think everybody saw on the internet and on TV was Sunak apparently completely dissing Matt Hancock, and it was incredibly funny because Matt Hancock was there with a big smile on his face, clapping away when the minute the Prime Minister, well, before he was voted in, actually walked past and then his face just dropped. It was so funny.
But how much of a snub do you think that actually was?
Well, I don't know. But then the other good thing I want to mention this is the fact that Gove is back as Levelling Up Secretary, and I think that's a really good move.
Well,
I think that's one of the better
it's like
moves.
having a snake, isn't it? You probably want to keep the snake close to your bosom so you can see who it's going to bite. The reality is Gove is a fairly treacherous individual, but he's also
effective.
Very confident and effective.
Yes.
I agree with you. Can I just mention one thing about Rees-Mogg? Rees-Mogg is the character that P.G. Wodehouse didn't dare invent, isn't he?
Yeah.
And but he's also quite spiteful. And what he had to say about Sunak being a socialist and all that, said in that awful English, exaggerated English accent that you used to only be able to hear on 1930s newsreels, and now you can hear from him.
The Pathé newsreels.
I know. I think a spell on the back benches is richly deserved.
Yeah. We're going to be looking at the front benches with real interest today. Prime Minister's Questions gets underway. The first time Rishi Sunak will go head-to-head with Sir Keir Starmer. How's he going to fare, Claire?
Oh, he's going to fare very well. I mean, Rishi Sunak is a statesman. I mean, can I dare say it, he's born to do this. You know, he's got a great diplomacy, he's got great aplomb.
Does he have the sort of charisma and the wit needed?
I think he'll evolve into that. I think it will come if he doesn't already have it. But there is no opposition. I've been saying this for months. I'm completely politically homeless. It's an absolute cesspit in the Commons at the moment. And Keir Starmer is absolutely no opposition, nor is the Labour Party. You look at bring it down to ethnic minorities if you want. The first Prime Minister of colour, in the Labour Party, who is there to compete with that? No one. The strength of the women that he has behind him, Theresa Coffey, Kwame, Penny Mordaunt.
They're not.
Yes, very, very much powerful, really good, intelligent women. But the Labour Party has got nothing.
But some people say, David, he's a bit of a wooden performer, kind of. He's better with an auto cue. He's not. I mean,
well, look, he's there to govern.
Grow into that, but you see, I'm a long way from believing that a lot of shouting the odds and saying clever things at Prime Minister's Question Time is really what you want of a Prime Minister.
Well, Boris Johnson would disagree.
Of course, but that's all he had.
Yes, the bluster.
He didn't have the real substance. Years ago, I was very close to the Republican Party, particularly to Ronald Reagan, and a whole bunch of his closest supporters came to see a Prime Minister's Question Time. And they said, gee, Ronnie could never have coped with that. I said, but to be honest with you, did Ronald Reagan really need to cope with that? Ronald Reagan was Uncle Sam. He reached out to the American people. He didn't need to make smart-ass replies all the time in Congress. Their system doesn't allow that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure their system is so wrong. Boris's clever witticisms, did they help him become a good Prime Minister? Absolutely no way.
And on that note, we're talking about PMQs, and we'll be watching it as journalists, broadcasters, politicians later. It'll be really interesting. Do the public really care?
That's exactly the point. I think what happens in the House of Commons is it's like going into a religious service and not really understanding what the religion is all about,
Yeah, because the questions are fed, they're there already, it's pre-rehearsed in a way,
So the public might not care about Prime Minister's questions, but they certainly do care about who their Prime Minister is.
That's the point.
And let's think about this. Can Rishi Sunak turn things around sufficiently enough that he could win a general election?
I don't think so. I think what he has to do is lose in a very good way. I mean, he might be able to. The only thing I was saying, I was going through it with a friend of mine who was quite prominent as advisor to Tony Blair, and he said, what you are failing to understand is that Tony Blair was hugely well regarded by the British public, and that is certainly not the case with the Labour leadership at the moment. But, on the face of it, figures like this, where Liz Truss was as popular as Prince Andrew, I mean, you cannot recover from that in 2 years when John Major, after the catastrophic beginning to his premiership and falling out of the exchange rate mechanism, 10 points for those who can tell me all about the exchange rate mechanism, by the way, but it no longer matters. But at the time, it mattered a huge amount. And then the government settled down. Kenneth Clarke was a very good chancellor. They handed over arguably the best financial and economic situation that had ever been handed over to an incoming government. Why was that? Because the public had had enough of the Tories, and it didn't matter what happened, the Tories were going to be shut down.
Well, key to that will be, for Sunak, pinning anything economically bad on Liz Truss now. It's because of the 45 days in jail, not because of the 12 years of Tory rule. And Liz Truss could make problems for him from the backbenches if he keeps pinning it on it.
I think Liz Truss is finished. Yeah. And I don't think it matters what she says. I think she is a busted flush.
Yeah.
But you never know. The thing about politics, it's endlessly fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, just Claire, quickly, can you win the next election?
It's a difficult...
Can you recover?
He could. Everything is possible. I mean, we've seen that. And the key was that Zelensky's now contacted him, so we'll see what handle he has on the Ukraine war, how he will steer the ship of British diplomacy through that, how he can get to Putin. Yeah. If the war is won, if the economic trajectory, which is
the economy's in trouble, quickly nip over to Kyiv.
Exactly, and just, do something. So we'll see. There's all these markers that could possibly indicate that, yes, he might.
And the only thing that I think Sunak has to worry about, He's got a lot going for him because his parents, father was a GP, mother was a pharmacist down in Southampton. He speaks, it's not, when you hear him talk, you don't know what part of the world he comes from, which is all very good. The worrying thing, though, is if the real Rishi Sunak is not the boy from Southampton, but the bought and paid for son of a billionaire. If he wanders round, with that awful coffee cup, which keeps his coffee at a constant... If he looks like a...
It's about how he's going to actually
like a
speak to the public.
And we should add son-in-law of a billionaire.
Son-in-law,
Yes.
yeah.
Son-in-law of a billionaire.
Yeah.
David, Claire, thank you very much for
Yeah.
going through the papers with us. They'll rejoin us in the next hour. But right now, it's 10 to 7. Let's bring you up to date with the other stories making the headlines.
Rishi Sunak, then, as we've just been talking about, making his first appearance in the Commons as Prime Minister at midday today. We'll bring it to you here on GB News. He will face off against opposition leader Sir Keir Starmer at PMQs as Labour calls for an immediate general election.
As inflation surpasses 10%, experts are warning scams and fraud are on the rise. Recent figures show that over £600 million was lost due to fraud in the first half of 2022. People are being urged to stay alert as criminals look to exploit the cost of living crisis.
Northern Ireland businesses are facing what they have described as a tipping point, with 1 in 5 reportedly struggling. The president of the Northern Ireland Chamber, Gillian Macaulay, has called this week pivotal in ending Stormont's political stagnation.
Now, new data shows that more than 7 in 10 NHS trusts have failed to see patients who are urgently referred for suspected cancer within that 2-week target.
The number of hospitals failing to hit the national target for cancer referrals is the highest it has been for at least 3 years. Let's speak to former chief of the WHO's cancer programme, Carol Sikora. Morning to you, Carol. Put simply, why is this happening?
Yes, it's very sad, really, because any delays in the diagnosis of cancer means that the results are inevitably poorer. And, it's a merger of several things happening. First of all, the diagnostic capacity in the NHS isn't as good as it should be. And that was well before COVID. COVID comes along and really weakens that capacity considerably. And then the other problem we have is that getting to see your GP, which is the first hurdle most people face if they think they've got something serious, you've got to pick up that phone and make that call. And it sometimes just rings and rings. And so access to the NHS is getting increasingly more difficult. So we've got to do something now. I think this just shows how poor it's got.
The question is, what do we do? I mean, this is one of endless stories of underfunding and understaffing of the NHS.
I know. The workforce capacity is part of the problem. It's more important than the equipment capacity because, after all, if you have a CT scanner and you've got people, you can run it for longer hours. You can run it through the night, as they do in China. Here, we tend to shut at 5 or 6 o'clock. Now, that could change, and we could keep things going. I think the overall problem is that the 2-week wait was introduced in the year 2000, 22 years ago. I was on the committee that introduced it, and it was a stopgap measure. The idea was no one should wait more than 2 weeks, whatever your problems. I mean, you can't diagnose cancer by talking to people and examining them. You need to do some investigation. So no one should actually have to wait 2 weeks. And in Europe, you don't. But here, it was a stopgap 22 years ago, and we've never got back to the idea that everyone should have an appointment within 2 weeks, and it was a magical figure. 2 weeks just sounds good, but even that target's being missed.
So would recruitment go a long way towards solving this waiting time problem?
I listen to the politicians talk, as we have done recently, a lot, and they talk about getting 50,000 new nurses. Where are they going to come from? There aren't 50,000 nurses in the UK not working. I can assure the Minister of Health of that. You can recruit from abroad, and there have been increasing drives to recruit people from abroad, not just nurses, but doctors, other staff, other skilled technical staff for the health service. The trouble there is there's a limited pot of people. Some of them will come, they'll come for 2 or 3 years, they'll gain from the experience and go back, and that's great. But many will actually come and they're depriving their own country, who's paid for their training, of their skills. And so that's another problem we've got. What we've got to do is really begin at the beginning. Long-term plan. Let's look at healthcare professions, all of them, and see how we can make them more attractive. It's not just about money. It's about organization. It's about flexibility. It's about letting people develop. So a healthcare assistant comes to the health service and can become a brain surgeon if she wants, for example. Why not have pathways like that? All feasible, done in other countries, not done here.
Very quickly, Carol, just for time, look, the kind of referrals we're talking about are really stressful for those individual patients. What advice would you have for someone who's desperately trying to get seen?
I think the most important thing is to persist. That people that persist tend to get through. It's difficult. Don't be rude. Don't get aggressive. Don't start swearing at the poor receptionist. Just try and make that first appointment. And if you don't get anywhere, go again. Phone 111, the answer service, which is really very good. There are many ways into the health service, but people don't persist because they get put off by the GP and the whole business of getting a GP appointment. Just don't be put off, persist.
Carol, thanks for your thoughts this morning. Really appreciate it. Carol Sikora there, oncologist, speaking to us. And we've got lots more to come on Rishi Sunak's new cabinet, haven't we?
Yes, Rishi's reshuffle, as many are talking about it. Who's in, who's out? Will they be able to solve what the Prime Minister has called this profound crisis? Much more of that to come after the weather.
Good morning, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest broadcast from the Met Office. Wednesday, sunny spells, scattered showers, blustery winds, but very mild for the time of year. Looking at the pressure pattern, and low pressure still dominates our weather as we move through the next few days, drawing in warm air from the near continent, but tightly packed isobars indicate quite brisk winds at times, particularly over the next 24 hours. So a gusty start to the day. Wednesday morning, sunny spells, scattered showers pushing their way north and eastwards, but it should slowly become a bit drier as we head through the morning. There will be a few scattered showers around, perhaps heavy at times, but most places staying dry. A blustery afternoon though, winds still gusting around 40-45 miles an hour around some western coasts. But a southerly direction with those winds means another warm day, 15, 16, 17 in the north, 18 to 20 Celsius across southern parts. So exceptionally mild for the time of year. Through into the evening, we'll see a few showers around, plenty of clear spells initially. Still very windy across the far northwest of Scotland, outbreaks of rain here. And then overnight, we'll see thicker clouds, some patchy rain starting to push northwards. This will stop the temperatures from dropping too low. Again, 12 to 16 Celsius for many. The average should be around 6 or 7. So a warm night to come. Thursday morning, quite a cloudy start, perhaps some sunny spells for Northern Ireland, southern Scotland initially, but patchy cloud and rain will push its way northwards through the day. The wind should ease as the day goes on, perhaps still a little blustery around the coast. And there will be some drier, brighter interludes at times, particularly across the south and the east. And where we see any spells of sunshine, it will lift temperatures into the low 20s, 21 Celsius possible, but mild for everyone, 15 to 17 Celsius, normally 14 or 15 as a high at this time of the year. It stays similar as we move towards the end of the week into the weekend, further blustery rain at times, and temperatures staying on the mild side. See you again soon.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland. On TV.
On radio.
And online.
we're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's
News channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Every Saturday at 2 o'clock, join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain. I'm not afraid to give you a platform and say it how it is.
Come on, make the case. Something like this is very, very important to people.
And we're always up for a laugh on this show.
God, honestly, you'd think there were no problems in the world.
Real Britain, every Saturday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Rishi Sunak pledges to fix Liz Truss's mistakes as he assembles his cabinet.
Very good morning to you. It is 7 o'clock on Wednesday, the 26th of October. This is Breakfast on GB News with Paul Hawkins and Rosie Wright. Your top stories this morning.
As you know, Rishi Sunak has vowed to fix the mistakes of the previous government in his first speech as Prime Minister. Yesterday, he assembled a new cabinet that saw Suella Braverman return to government, despite resigning just last week.
Sunak will face off against the Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer in the Commons at midday today in his first PMQs, which we will bring to you here on GB News.
Dock workers at one of the UK's largest container ports kick off 2 weeks of strikes today after talks collapsed in chaos. While the industrial action at the port of Liverpool is likely to further disrupt the country's supply chain, we've been at the picket line.
And LGBTQ campaigner Peter Tatchell is on his way back from Qatar after being arrested for protesting about the country's human rights abuses ahead of the World Cup. We'll speak to his friend who has praised his courage.
Please do get in touch. Lots of you have got your perspective on Rishi's reshuffle. Do you have confidence in the new cabinet? Can the Prime Minister restore the faith of not just the party but the public as well? Email us gbviews@gbnews.uk or drop us a tweet @gbnews.
Our top story then this morning, Rishi Sunak using his first speech as PM to pledge that he will fix the mistakes of Liz Truss's premiership and restore integrity to government.
I want to pay tribute to my predecessor, Liz Truss. She was not wrong to want to improve growth in this country. It is a noble aim. And I admired her restlessness to create change. But some mistakes were made.
So let's look at the team around Rishi Sunak. The Prime Minister's new cabinet assembled yesterday, and there are many of the same faces from the previous one, including the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, controversially reappointed after being forced to resign just days ago.
The Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, who took over from Kwasi Kwarteng in an attempt to calm markets, has stayed in post.
As did the Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly.
Sunak will face his first public challenge today when he goes head-to-head with Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer at Prime Minister's Questions.
Well, let's get more analysis and head over to Downing Street, where our political correspondent Tom Harwood is there for us. Tom, a very good morning to you. A new morning, a new team around the Prime Minister. Talk us through sort of some of the complexities of the new cabinet.
Yes, I think complexity is the exactly correct word to use here because, of course, first we saw throughout the early afternoon 11 sackings from the last cabinet. That was more than many people expected. There were a huge number of ministers turfed out, about a third of the cabinet gone. But then, over the course of the later afternoon and indeed early evening, we started to see some more familiar faces return to Downing Street. Now, this is people who have served in the cabinets of, for example, David Cameron, Theresa May, Boris Johnson, and indeed some of Liz Truss. There are some people returning to cabinet after a little hiatus. Michael Gove back at the Department for Levelling Up is a notable point there. Also Mark Harper, who was of course for a time a chief whip many years ago, is now over as transport secretary. So there are some faces being brought back, but also some new people who seem to be much more on the Rishi Sunak loyalist side. Mel Stride, for example, at DWP, the Department for Work and Pensions, he actually managed Rishi Sunak's leadership campaign over the summer. So clearly there is a bit of a mixed story to tell here. Some of the headline grabbing elements are, of course, that there are some of those people who are seen to be Liz Truss or indeed Boris Johnson loyalists. James Cleverly, the Foreign Secretary, is seen to be very close to Boris Johnson. And of course, Suella Braverman back after around a 5-day hiatus as Home Secretary, someone from the right of the party. That's created a little bit of a storm, of course, because the reason professed for her leaving government just last Wednesday was that she breached the ministerial code. Now, allies of her would say that was in a very minor way, and in fact the wider row that meant her leaving government was actually about migration and policy differences between her and Liz Truss. But clearly this is something the opposition is jumping upon too. Really what Rishi Sunak has been trying to do over the course of the last day is present a more unified top team. However, there are some people in their leaving government who will be missed. Clearly, the former Levelling Up Secretary, Simon Clarke, the MP for Middlesbrough South and East Cleveland, is a loss to government. It's a loss of a red wall voice there. But also one of the criticisms is how few women there are at the top team of this new number 10, and I wonder if there will be more junior ministerial appointments, which we are expecting through the rest of this morning and this afternoon. Perhaps there'll be greater gender diversity there. That's just some of the criticism that Rishi Sunak has faced so far, but broadly it looks like the party is relatively placated with the ideological diversity within the cabinet. Now, the first cabinet meeting is expected a little later this morning, and we'll see if we can have a chance to shout across at the new top team governing the country to see what they make of it.
Thank you, Tom. Good luck with that hectoring. Tom Harwood, our political correspondent at Downing Street there for us. Lots of you, by the way, getting in touch with us this morning on Suella Braverman's return to the Cabinet. Joyce says Suella seems to be our only hope of sorting out the immigration problem.
And John says if they don't get to grips with immigration, that will be it for the Tory party.
GB Views at gbnews.uk. Let's find out if the party is relatively placated. As Tom was saying, we're joined by Holly Whitbread, and a Conservative councillor from Essex. Are you relatively placated?
I think the Cabinet is a really good mix, actually. I was really pleased to see James Cleverly back and Ben Wallace. So I think there's some real kind of key figures that actually do bring unity, and that I know a lot of the grassroots are really happy to see back. I mean, I think what's important for the party and most importantly the country now is that stability. And I think to achieve that stability at a parliamentary level, there needs to be that unity and kind of the broad church kind of represented at the highest levels.
Yeah, he said he's going to sort of deal with the errors, the mistakes made of Liz Truss. Do you think he's going to do that? And if so, how?
He's got a big challenge. I mean, I think what was good to hear in his speech is he did recognise that need for growth, because whilst the implementation of Liz Truss's policies obviously weren't correct, I think there was a lot there that she said in terms of the diagnosis of the economy, which is correct. And obviously a lot of Conservative members support that idea. So I think that was certainly kind of a positive. But he's got a big challenge ahead of him. And I think, first of all, he needs to regain stability, some economic credibility, and hopefully he can then go on to deliver on, also importantly, some of those 2019 manifesto commitments as well.
Yeah, is it possible to grow the economy and be tough on immigration?
I think it's got to be a balanced approach, hasn't it? Particularly when you're looking at some of those kind of key jobs and some of those skills that we need in this country. that's important. But I think where we need to be tough on immigration is some of those kind of illegal immigration, which I hope Suella Braverman will do and really be a focus of her tenure as Home Secretary.
So you think you can relax visas for certain sectors of the economy that really need recruitment, like healthcare, like construction, like the hospitality industry, but still sound tough on immigration?
I think so. I think you need to have a look at where the skills are needed in our economy. I think that's really important.
Yeah.
And I think you need to have a kind of a broad look at that, where skills are needed. But I think that illegal immigration is where the kind of real challenge is and what we need to tackle.
Yeah.
Which has not been an easy task, and many people will say they've totally failed on that regard. Let's just look at the views of Jason. Good morning. Thank you for getting in touch. He just says, we need an election. There's no way the Tories can win because of the complete lash-up of changing leaders just to save themselves. Now, as much as the Conservatives can say we're not going to hold an election, that call and that clamour for one is going to get extremely strong, and I expect we'll hear a lot of it at Prime Minister's questions today. How does Rishi Sunak wriggle out of that?
Well, I think Rishi's mandate is the 2019 mandate, which we fought an election on only 3 years ago. And I think what is important, and actually what he did say on the streets of 10 Downing Street yesterday, was it's about delivering on those kind of key pledges from 20,000 police, protecting our NHS, and also, once we've got Brexit done now, actually getting the benefits of Brexit as well. So I think that is Rishi's mandate, and he has to be able to deliver on that to prove that we need some stability now, not a general election, certainly for a good period of time.
Yeah, David Mellor's already said that he thinks Rishi Sunak can't win the next election. Would you agree with that, or is the jury out?
I think the jury is certainly out. I mean, I don't think people are convinced by Keir Starmer. At the moment, they've got this kind of boost out of the fact that obviously things have not been ideal for the Conservative Party in recent months, and actually that's where the boost has come. So I think it's a bit of an artificial boost. And as someone who kind of goes out campaigning, knocking on doors, I think that people will be willing to give Rishi a chance. They were convinced by the 2019 manifesto, and now we need to deliver on that as well as facing the challenges of today.
Holly, thank you so much for speaking to us. Appreciate that. That is Conservative Councillor for Epping and Faden in Essex, Holly Whitbread.
But what is happening to the economy and the markets in the wake of the news? Well, UK government borrowing costs have fallen to levels not seen since before that mini-budget.
Yeah, the drop follows Rishi Sunak becoming PM. So will he be the person to finally calm UK markets? Joining us now is Jane Foley, Head of FX Strategy at Rabobank. Good to see you, Jane. The markets man is what a lot of people are calling him.
Well, that's right, and this is because of his background. He has worked in the markets as a younger man, and of course, he was Chancellor for 3 years, so he actually understands the markets. Now, this is really important. We've got to remember the UK is an economy with a large amount of debt, and we need investors to buy that debt. So we do need to speak to the markets, to speak to investors, and we know that the mini-budget really didn't do that. It did quite the opposite. So what's really happening in the economy right now is our biggest problem is inflation. So we have a central bank, the Bank of England, that's mandated to bring that down, and it does that by rising interest rates and taking demand out of the economy, meaning that we've got less money in our pockets. Now, Liz Truss came in talking about growth and talking about tax cuts, which was going to put more money in our pockets, meaning that the government was going to be in opposition to the central bank, and that would have meant that interest rates would have had to go up even more to take account of those tax cuts. Now, it seems that we have a Chancellor that understands that the government has to work in parlance really with the central bank, and it does seem likely that when we get the next fiscal package, hopefully on Monday, though there are reports that might be delayed now, we will probably get tax hikes, meaning that the monetary policy and the fiscal policy will be working together, meaning the Bank of England, while it will still put interest rates up, won't have to put them up as high as it would have done otherwise. And that is good for anyone whose mortgage deal is going to come for an end in the next couple of months.
Yes, and absolutely a bitter pill to swallow for the people who just had to, you maybe remortgage or get a mortgage in the last few months. Let's just look at some of the words used by Rishi Sunak. And he said the first thing he's got to do is to deal with this profound economic crisis and promised that he'd prioritise economic stability. I'm sure we can all have empathy that that's what he wants to do. How does he do that?
Well, it's going to be really quite tough, because if we look at what the UK fundamentals were like before that mini budget on September the 23rd, they were already looking pretty sour. And yes, okay, so we have Chancellor Hunt, which the markets like, and we have a Chancellor, we have a Prime Minister rather, that seems to understand investors' needs too. That is good. But those sour fundamentals still very much remain in place. We have, of course, very low growth in productivity, which is output per head in recent years. We've got a lack of investment. Investment growth, really, since the Brexit referendum, has been really quite weak. And we've got a current account deficit. Now, that means that we're relying on overseas investors to plug that hole. And they need to see a lineup of fundamentals that they like in order to put their money into the UK. So we need to improve our fundamentals, and right now they are pretty weak. So it's going to be a difficult task for Sunak, but I think the first agreement really is that we need to fight inflation. We need the government to be on the same page as the Bank of England to get inflation down. That's going to take a while, and then I think after that we can start looking to growth positive policies.
Yeah, how do the markets feel about Rishi Sunak's tackling the ongoing problem in the British economy when it comes to productivity?
Again, this really needs investment, and this is the difficulty, because you need to get investors buy-in. Now, this could be some of those supply side reforms, perhaps similar to the ones that Liz Truss was talking about, what we never really saw off the ground. And I think really importantly, we need a government with a lot of direction, and we hear a lot about Brexit's now done, but actually I think from investors' point of view, it's just begun. They want to see a post-Brexit Britain, maybe with those trade deals. They want to see why they should be investing in the UK. And I think there's a lot of work to be done to convince investors of that right now.
Thank you so much for talking to us, Jane Foley, Head of FX Strategy at Rabobank. Really appreciate your analysis. I mean, Rishi Sunak said this means there'll be difficult decisions to come. Well, how difficult might they be? How financially painful might they be, particularly for the people on the lowest incomes? And one of the real big concerns and criticisms of Rishi Sunak is how relatable is he to people who are making decisions about how much money to top the meter up with or what things they can buy in the supermarket?
Yeah, indeed. How relatable is he? Will he be an effective general election campaigner? The jury's still out on that. GB Views at gbnews.uk. It is 7:16. Let's bring you up to date with what else is happening this morning.
Well, the new Prime Minister has held talks with the First Ministers of Scotland and Wales. Well, speaking with Nicola Sturgeon and Mark Drakeford, Sunak is said to have emphasised the UK's shared challenges, with Sturgeon concluding the talks had been constructive.
Around 7 in 10 NHS trusts are failing to meet their targets for cancer referrals. In England, the current wait time target for a hospital appointment for suspected cancer is 2 weeks. NHS England says 93% of patients should be seen within this time frame. The latest data shows this target is routinely not being met.
Northern Ireland businesses are facing what they've described as a tipping point, with 1 in 5 businesses reportedly struggling. The president of the Northern Ireland Chamber has called this week pivotal in ending Stormont's political stagnation.
So one of the things Rishi Sunak will have to get to grips with is of course, the ongoing industrial action across various sectors of the economy, including dock workers, hundreds of them at the Port of Liverpool, beginning another round of strike action in a dispute over pay.
Staff also walked out back in September. No agreement was made. So what's happening? Our North West of England reporter Sophie Reaper has the story from behind the picket line.
One of the busiest container ports in Northern Europe, brought to a standstill by the latest round of dock strikes. Workers at the Port of Liverpool have come together to demand a wage increase in line with the rise in inflation, but so far a deal is yet to be struck.
This is a profitable company, and we believe, like other workers in the country, we're facing the cost of living crisis like everybody else, and we want a fair deal for our members.
The Port of Liverpool is run and operated by Peel Ports, who last week reported they had offered their workers an 11% pay rise. That would be the highest percentage increase of any port group in the UK.
Peel Ports' press statement is a complete misrepresentation of the deal that was put to us. There are 3 groups on strike here. 2 of them have been offered 9%. The other group that Peel claim is 11% offer is actually 9.2% and a one-off payment.
What would it take for the workers to go back to work?
Well, I believe if Peel Ports made an offer of 11% like the claiming they have, I think that would be the basis of an acceptable deal.
There are, of course, two sides to every story, and strikes are now going to continue here at the Port of Liverpool for the next 2 weeks. That's unless Peel Ports will offer the dock workers a rise in pay that they deem to be acceptable. In a statement, Peel Ports have said the latest 2-week strike will cause yet further damage to our customers, the business and the Liverpool City region, threatening even more jobs at the port. It's wholly irresponsible of Unite to prolong this self-defeating strike. And so, for now at least, it seems negotiations at the Port of Liverpool remain as unmoved as the shipping containers, with its workers prepared to be on strike for the long haul. Sophie Reaper, GB News.
After the break, Paul Coyte's going to be here with all the biggest sports stories, including why one Wrexham player is the owner of a very controversial pair of football boots.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
On radio,
And online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Oh, Paul is back with his puns. I haven't missed it. It's 24 minutes past 7. Lots to come on the programme.
Yeah.
Will Qatar be safe for LGBT people when it comes to the World Cup? In about 20 minutes' time, we're going to be speaking to a friend of Peter Tatchell after the campaigner was arrested in the Gulf state.
Yeah, and at 8:20 we'll ask the Labour Party if they're feeling confident as Rishi Sunak prepares for his first PMQs against Keir Starmer. And lots of you getting involved in the conversations this morning, aren't they?
Well, particularly about the new cabinet and what it looks like. Morning to Mark, who says Rishi Sunak was one of the big reasons for this mess with the huge borrowing in order to keep people at home.
Yeah, Richard says there is no magic wand to sort all the problems out with the economy. A Labour government will still have the same issues to deal with. That is a very good point, Richard. That is what we will be talking to the Labour government about later on.
So please weigh in. Let us know what you think of the new Prime Minister's team. He said he's going to fix the mistakes Liz Truss made. Can he? Will he? GBviews at gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews.
Right then, let's talk about strikers, but not the normal kind. You hate it, don't you? Paul Coy joins us to discuss the latest sports stories.
I think it's the third time Paul's made that joke.
Yes.
But it's the first time he's managed to do it, not in an advert break.
Did you laugh first time?
No, I didn't.
I chuckled. I can see those eyes looking at me.
But our first story isn't even about football, it's about cricket.
Well, cricket's
Is
on.
it? Are we, oh, right,
Cricket's
okay.
on. You're a cricket guy, aren't you?
Yeah,
Because
I am.
Well, the cricket's
yeah,
on now.
T20 World Cup on at the moment.
T20 World Cup. It's
in Australia.
At the MCG, this one. Melbourne Cricket Ground, you know, one of the most famous cricket grounds in the world, although it's not terribly full. Although it will be when England play, if they're playing, when they play against Australia on Friday. But England are playing Ireland in the T20 World Cup. It started at 5 o'clock this morning. So Ireland have just finished their innings, 157 all out. So I think they got to 19 overs.
England
So
should chase that down.
They should chase that down because that's what England like to do, is chase. So it shouldn't be a problem. So bowled out in the 19th over. So it's looking good. It's looking fine, you know?
Yeah.
It's I hate to use that momentum phrase, which always comes up in sport, but it's all about momentum. Good start against Afghanistan, Ireland, then Australia. Can you imagine if we're responsible for putting Australia out?
Yeah, is
of
this
the T20 World Cup at the end of the week?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't this going to overlap with the Football World Cup at the same time?
I think so, because there's so many World Cups. We've got the football, of course, is coming up in 3 weeks. We have the Rugby Union, the Women's Rugby Union World Cup. We have the Rugby League World Cup, the T20 World Cup. So, quite frankly, I think we're going to win everything, Paul. So, it's... Maybe I'm just a little over-optimistic. But I don't know what our best chance is. Maybe the Rugby League, maybe the Rugby Union for the women, and then we probably look at the T20, which we're very good, and maybe we'll put football last. But you never know. You never know.
And Champions League last night as well.
Yeah.
Not particularly thrilling, looking at the results.
Well, it wasn't because, I mean, it was pretty much a dead rubber, really, as far as Man City were concerned. So they went away to Borussia Dortmund and it was 0-0. But I tell you what is the concern for Manchester City. Well, the first concern is that they're desperate to win the Champions League because they've never won it and they've fallen at the last hurdle with it against Chelsea. Of course, David Mellor will tell you all about that. But it's something they desperately need to win because it's the only thing that they don't have in the trophy cabinet. But the problem that they have is penalties. Now, Riyad Mahrez, fantastic footballer, again, missed a penalty. And I'm looking at some stats here. So this may not sound like a lot of misses, but when you talk about penalties, Man City have missed 25 of the last 80. Riyad Mahrez has missed 3 out of the last 4 penalties he's taken. So, and then you look at some of the other players. Raheem Sterling has missed 3 out of the 7 he's taken. But then you've got Haaland, who has scored 2 out of 2, but he was off the pitch at the time.
Yeah.
But the thing is, when we talk about penalties, and of course we know this with England, it's all about what's in the head. It's not about any footballer could go up and put the ball in any part of the goal they would want in training very easily. But you just wonder whether mentally Riyad Mahrez is the right guy to be taking penalties for Manchester City because he hasn't got a good record. And then each time you miss, of course, when you step up, you're thinking about it too much. So I don't know whether I'm getting ahead of myself, but I'm thinking of Manchester City, maybe get to the Champions League final. Can you imagine it goes to penalties?
They've got to fix it. They've got to fix the psychology.
Well, the thing is, Pep Guardiola said, we'll get him practising. But practising, you can't replicate.
You can't recreate the drama and the adrenaline and the pressure.
You can't at all. I mean, I remember having a chat with Adam Peaty, of course, one of our greatest swimmers of all time. And what he would do, and he would try and recreate going for a gold medal in the Olympic Games. So, well, how do you do that? And he would have earphones, the sound of crowds, to try and replicate, close his eyes. Can you imagine, bringing crowds in? Yeah, we'd like 30,000 people to come in
just for practice.
And boo us, just to see if we can get... Because that's the only way you can replicate it, because you can't do it on the training.
Yeah, interesting. And then finally...
I should mention Chelsea beat Salzburg 2-0.
Yes, that was right. Yes, especially David Miller will be unhappy if you... Yes.
He will be. That's why there's a smile on his face. Celtic, although Claire won't be very happy because Celtic are now not only out of the Champions League, but they're out of Europe as well, because if they were third, they qualify for the Europa, but they're out, so they will be last in their group.
Right, and then finally, the story to which I was alluding when I made the terrible joke about strikers.
Yes.
The Wrexham forward, Paul Mullin, has been slapped on the wrist for wearing a controversial pair of boots.
Well, the thing is, he didn't actually wear them. They did play last night. So Wrexham beat Halifax 3-1 last night, and Paul Mullin on social media had these boots, and they often get their names stitched on the boots. You can have, your child's name, all that sort of stuff. So anyway, that is the pair of boots that he was going to wear last night. Mullin 10 on the front. OK, he's got his name on there. Yeah. But a slightly political slogan on the side, which has landed in a...
I mean, an expletive, if you're listening on the radio.
Yes, exactly. So he wrote an expletive about the Tories, and it was decided that it wouldn't be a good idea if he wore the boots. But then again, he'd have to put them on social media because... who'd see it anyway.
Yeah, and but the club have told him off and said it's not our decision. He went and did it without telling any of us.
Absolutely, and then they said, well, you're not going to be wearing those boots. But I don't know what Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney, who of course own Wrexham now, they'll probably make a film about it, quite frankly, is what they'll do. But he's...
does he tend to cut in from the left wing?
See, now that was good. That was more like it.
Right.
That was excellent.
Paul, thank you very much.
I'll be using that tomorrow, if that's OK. Thank you.
Don't go anywhere. After the break, we're going to be going through the papers with David and Claire to tease through all of the political shenanigans. A new cabinet in place. What do we make of them?
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
On Mark Dolan tonight, we have a simple plan, which is to inform, stimulate and entertain in equal measure. It's all about getting your opinions on the national television airwaves. I love my viewer emails, mark@gbnews.uk. So do join me from 9 p.m. to midnight every Friday, Saturday and Sunday for big guests, big opinions and a big presenter. 6'5", don't you know? See you then on GB News.
We're
would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We're trying to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Join me, Arlene Foster, for the briefing on GB News. Every Friday at 3 p.m, I'll give you all the latest political news and analysis, and we'll have robust live debate. To make sure that you're caught up on all of the biggest issues of the day, we'll bring on experts in their field. I'll ask the questions that you'd like to ask. We're not afraid to tackle discussions from all perspectives, including yours. Don't forget, The Briefing with me, Arlene Foster, every Friday at 3 p.m. on GB News.
Welcome back. It is 7:34. Good to have you with us this morning. Let's bring you up to date with the top stories then.
Rishi Sunak is going to make his first appearance in the Commons as Prime Minister at midday today. He's going to face off against the opposition leader, Sir Keir Starmer, at Prime Minister's questions as Labour calls for an immediate general election.
The American President Joe Biden has reaffirmed that the UK is the United States' closest ally on a call with the new Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, not Rishi Sunak, Sunak.
Sunak,
he called him. We Sunak you. The two leaders also discussed the war in Ukraine and will meet at the G20 summit in Indonesia in the coming weeks.
The Princess of Wales has become the patron of an army officer in her goal to be the first woman to cross Antarctica on her own. Well, Kate is formally backing Captain Preet Chandy's challenge of travelling more than 1,000 miles across the frozen continent, wishing her good luck over the phone.
Let's go through this morning's papers then with M&M, as we're calling them, the real Slim Shady, David Mellor, joining us with broadcaster Claire Muldoon. Where should we start?
Well, let's talk about, we're going to have to delve back into the new cabinet that Rishi Sunak has pulled around him. And David, let's go to the Telegraph if we can. Ben Wallace won't quit, is their story.
Yes, I think this is an interesting one because Ben Wallace has been one of the successors of this government, because he's an ex-military man and he has appeared to be reassuring. He's a reassuring presence at a difficult time. But, of course, what he said was that if the government didn't stick to its proposal to increase defence spending, which is presently at 2% of GDP, to 3%, then he would go. Well, Sunak has slightly called his bluff by saying he won't guarantee that, and Wallace is staying. I mean, it's an interesting one, isn't it, when you think about we obviously want our armed forces to be properly kitted out. But I got to tell you that when I was Chief Secretary of the Treasury, the most inefficient department by a long way was Defence. And they were capable of doing all kinds of crazy things, like building a command centre under Whitehall so badly, then there's so much machinery in there that people couldn't get in to operate it. I mean, that's the sort of thing they're up to. So what about HMS Prince of Wales?
Yeah, couldn't even beat the dog.
Billions.
Yep.
And what about that? There's a tank, and I'm going to now forget the name of that tank, but it's cost $5 billion, and it's never, ever going to go into service. And this is one of the big problems with a lot of political debate. People say, we're going to spend billions on this. But you can chuck billions away. The question is, what value for money are you going to get? And 3% of GDP, just to give some of these defence contractors the opportunity to build things that don't work, count me out.
Yeah, well, isn't the National Audit Office there to scrutinise these things, isn't it?
Yeah, but it generally doesn't so much on defence because it's a very complex subject. But if Rishi Sunak wants to make it clear that he needs demonstrable value for money for what they spend, I'm all for that.
Well, how much value does Ben Wallace bring?
I think Ben Wallace is a good man. He suits the job. He never has encouraged any speculation that he would go for the leadership. And maybe he feels that, looking like an army officer, doing what he does, he's the right hole
He
in
can
the
command
right.
some discipline,
Yeah.
perhaps,
Exactly.
into the department. Well, he certainly led the department under Johnson and Truss, so I think it's nice to have some stability going forward. One little vein of continuity won't go amiss.
And he's a good counterbalance to what I would call the Penny Mordaunt view of life.
But also in terms of funding 3% of GDP, we were talking earlier about the amount of investment you make into defence, but we don't talk about investment when we talk about the NHS, do we? Which leads us on to the next story.
Well, yeah, let's talk about this. We're in the Times now, page 10, and talking about sort of an exodus of staff who are struggling with the menopause.
Well, it would appear to be from some report that was written. And I have two things on this. One, I don't like the word staff struggling with menopause because it's only women that struggle with menopause. And to be honest with you, these reports come out all the time. There seems to be a buzzword in the NHS.
Just quickly, Claire, aren't there more female staff than male staff in the NHS?
77%.
77%.
Yeah.
So I mean, so that is going to have an effect.
Of course, it's going to have an effect. But I'm sorry, but the menopause has been around since women were born. You know, this is not a new thing. This just smacks of buzzwords to me. You know, everyone's jumping on the bandwagon. Davina McCall has got a book out. We see celebrities endorsing, you know, the need to take care of yourself.
Can we just go backwards a tiny bit? What's the argument that the paper is making, and what are you taking issue with?
So the argument the paper was making is that 1 in 5 are GPs are women, right? And they are feeling there's a Medical Protection Society, the MPS did a survey, and these women are not feeling supported by the medical professionals that they're there to treat. But the key thing is, and it's been covered in quite a few of the papers, but the only paper that's picked this up is the Times. And it's a survey of 261 menopausal female doctors found that 14% felt supported by their employer, while 68% worry about symptoms affecting their work. Now, this is the key thing, because more than half said they were concerned about problems including a clinical negligence claim, inquest or disciplinary action. That's the key. They're frightened and disheartened that could be the cause of something, not their own personal feelings, which is awful. And I think this is the other issue that the NHS has at the moment, is that people are far too quick to blame. We've got the report out from the midwifery scandal, which is shocking. Midwifery in this country and in certain parts of the country has been completely negligent. I get that. But I don't think we should be allowed to sue the NHS. I really don't, because it's not there for insurance. It's there to treat people, you know, and we pay for it.
If somebody is injured, damaged, child, baby, whatever, then you have to be able to sue the NHS, because otherwise you expected then, you go to hospital, the NHS, through negligence, causes your child permanent disability. Are you supposed just to swallow that?
Well, to a certain extent, because it could happen anywhere. You know, it could happen in the private sector, or it could happen in the NHS.
The whole basis for the law is it compensates people for breaches of duty, and there's no more serious breach of duty than gratuitously damaging a child through negligence.
Well, you could take that one step further. It doesn't matter if it's a child or not, David. If it's a patient of the NHS and someone has been harmed, then there's protocol to get the doctor or the care staff struck off. I mean, there's a court case going on at the moment that we can't comment about because it's a live court case about a nurse who's on charge of killing and maiming children, of babies. OK, that's completely, you know, that is abhorrent and should never be countenanced at all. But for the NHS to have so much money being piled into it, where is it going? What's it doing?
So you think they're too concerned about a blame culture, which means they're protecting themselves rather than getting on with patient care first and foremost. There's another story about the NHS, and if you were watching earlier, we were speaking to someone who used to work for the World Health Organization in cancer treatment, David, about the number of trusts that are missing that really often crucial 2-week target to get someone seen if there's suspected cancer.
See, all of us have friends who have cancer. Maybe we'll end up with it ourselves. One of the things they all say to me is, I was lucky it was caught in time. And the reality is, if the NHS is not picking it up in time, every week, sometimes even days, actually matter. And you know what I find profoundly depressing? I mean, I do find it profoundly depressing that the NHS is a sort of religion, because when you're on your knees in front of something, you don't exactly query whether or not what the religious dogma is actually working. But the worrying thing is, billions and billions and billions of extra money every year is poured into the NHS, and yet the headlines are the same, that somehow or other it can't cope for financial reasons. And I just think, how on earth are we going to continue in this way, where the percentage of public expenditure that goes on the NHS continues to grow, and yet the headlines are still the same? They can't cope. Well, someone should get a grip and make sure they do cope. Because how much money are we going to tip away?
Do you think we've kind of become a little bit desensitised to the state of the NHS? Because the debate's been going on for so long, we kind of like shrug our shoulders and go, it's getting terrible. It doesn't even make headlines anymore.
Or the worst thing is just to believe all the stuff they come out with, as if somehow or other it's shortage of money. I mean, I haven't got the figures in front of me, but when you look at the increase in expenditure on the NHS, it's huge. And for them to keep on with what I would call simple failures. I mean, if you're going to fail to keep timely treatment of patients, timely examinations of patients with suspected cancer, what are you going to succeed in? There's nothing more important.
Well, when we spoke to someone earlier, they were saying that the problem, Claire, is recruitment. There are unfilled vacancies. And I just want to bring in what Jan's had to say to us this morning. There are many thousands of nurses available who only work 2 or 3 days a week. And that's because they work for agencies. They get paid a higher rate. They don't need to work full-time, and they can decide when they work. NHS managers are just fighting an impossible battle trying to staff their wards.
Well, they are. I don't think it's necessarily an issue of funding per se. I think it's an issue around the narrative of the NHS and the way we perceive the NHS. As David said, it's almost like a religion. But we're going to have to get over that. It wasn't that long ago that we were on the steps, virtue signalling almost, applauding everybody that worked for the NHS during COVID. And I would actually say that these targets that David Cameron brought in when he was Prime Minister, for the 2-week wait in terms of the clock ticking from the referral to the hospital, you've got 2 weeks in order for you to be seen, if it's an urgent referral, i.e. cancer, or another 6-week referral if there's something else. These are unattainable. This is all a hangover from lockdown. You've got the kicking of the can down the street when the GPs couldn't take or see patients face-to-face or online. They were told to go to casualty. All the doctors, if you ever speak to them, they say they're overworked. There's too much time given to paperwork. It's completely mismanaged. I think the NHS, and we've said this all along, it's got nothing to underpin it in terms of IT. The IT systems are extremely clunky. And us, as patients, we're more than demanding now, because it's my right to be seen. It's my right to be seen wherever I want to be seen, in which hospital. And then you've got this, it's almost like, as David Cameron brought in as well, you can send your child to any school you want to.
Choice is a good thing, isn't it?
Well, not in this case, it's not. The NHS is there to serve all. How can it serve all freely with parity if it's a postcode lottery and if we just can't get seen?
Let's turn our attention to the Mail, shall we, and food prices. These statistics came out yesterday, David, that the price of the lowest price items traditionally, pasta, oil, have started to soar.
Yeah. Well, because I wish to claim my credentials as a new man. I do the supermarket shopping.
Oh, wow.
Wow, you're so 1997.
Yes, I can take you to our local Tesco. They all know me, OK?
Do you know why they know you? Because of trolley rage. I bet you David Mellor goes in there and he's got a man in a mission. He just has to go and do it. And if woe betide anyone that gets between him and his shelf or his trolley.
Are you a trolley man or a basket man?
I'm very well. No, well, it depends how much I'm buying. I'm a trolley man when there's a lot, and I'm a basket man.
Self-service?
Yeah.
Till or conveyor belt?
No, I have to have a till.
I thought you'd be a conveyor belt man. Yeah.
But let me just say though, what I don't understand is, in the Mail has got this this list of vegetable oil up 65%, and there's things like milk up 29%.
Yeah.
Onions up 18%. So the
That's
average
gonna make you cry.
increase. Yeah, I love it. I'm an onion person, actually. But I do clean my teeth afterwards.
Yeah.
But 17% is the average increase in budget foods. I don't understand why this has been, but look, it's quite clear that while what they say in the Mail is, well, of course, people should buy own brand things, and I do buy own brand things whenever it's possible.
Okay.
Well, yeah, because why would you, I don't know, I'm partial to a bit of Greek yogurt. And, you know, you can get Tesco's Greek yogurt, 60-odd p, or you can pay a 180 for some other one. Well, you know, no one in their right mind would do that. But what bothers me is if those kind of essentials are going to go up at that amount in price, it's impossible not to say the government's number one commitment has got to be to bring down inflation.
Especially food inflation.
Do you know the other thing, the other point on that, which is crucial? Corner shops, not independent corner shops, but major brands that have moved in to take smaller units like your Sainsbury's, your Tesco's, your Co-op. £1 for a pint of milk in a local Co-op. That is scandalous. That is scandalous.
I would say one of the good things is the price of mince has apparently fallen, so that will offset.
It depends what they put in the mince.
Increase with pasta going up, mince coming down.
Just about.
It depends on the quality of the mince.
Oh, don't go there.
Eye up your mince and say, does this look good quality mince?
We've got to
or you're just talking mince.
But I know the point that our economics editor would make is that the people who buy those lowest price items are hit by inflation greater than everybody else.
Absolutely.
Because they're the people buying the items that are rising at the highest prices. So very painful and difficult for many families trying to do this.
I don't regard mince as a cheap food. I mean, mince is a quality food. My bolognese, people cross London.
I'll tell you what. In the next hour, we'll do the papers. We'll talk about your bolognese.
My bolognese.
And I'm quite keen to talk about the world's.
I talk a lot of bolognese, as you know.
It's
I like that.
10. It is now 10 to 8. Claire, David, thank you very much. They'll rejoin us in the next hour. But now let's talk about a story that's going to get increasingly serious over the next few weeks. LGBT plus campaigner Peter Tatchell's been released, having been arrested in Qatar for protesting the Gulf states' stance on gay rights.
The officials denied there was an arrest, and there has been some growing concern over the safety of those from the LGBTQ plus community, should they wish to travel there for the World Cup.
Well, joining us now is Jane Ozanne, founder of the UK's Ban Conversion Therapy Coalition and friend of Peter Tatchell. Thank you very much for your time. Have you spoken to Peter, and do you know how he's doing?
I'm afraid I haven't been able to speak to Peter. His phone isn't on. I know he's been on a flight to Australia. I understand he has been released and that he is well, so that is the good news, but I haven't been able to speak to him yet, sadly.
What we're hearing from the Qataris is that he wasn't actually arrested. He was asked, they asked someone to move on, and claims of an arrest were completely false.
Well, you just need to go and listen to Peter's own statement that says that he and a friend were taken, they were interrogated for 49 minutes and then released. And as usual, it's one word against another, but you can see the security guards approaching them if you look at the video that they were able to capture. You know, Peter is a seasoned, brave campaigner. He does this on purpose to show the truth about what happens to people who stand up against regimes like Qatar and in his case, just hold a placard saying that LGBT people are subjected to conversion practices. And he knows that he was one of the lucky ones. He was released without any physical damage after 49 minutes. But others are not so lucky. They can spend years in jail and even, sadly, face the death penalty. And that's why we need to be so concerned about Qatar's human rights record, particularly with regards to LGBT people, but also with regard to migrant workers and to women, sadly.
Peter is trying to make a point, and he is, as you've said there, being deliberately provocative to try and make a statement. Are you nervous of what might happen in the next couple of months?
Yes, I am. I mean, we've seen flip-flopping from the Qataris as to how they are likely to treat LGBT fans and, you know, whether people like myself can travel safely and be ourselves, whether we can hold rainbow flags or not. But to be fair to Peter, that's not his primary concern. His concern is the LGBT community in Qatar, their lives, their silent persecution. You know, there's a conversion therapy centre right next to the WAFIC centre, right next to the stadium where the World Cup final will be held. That is still open, and people are still being put through tortuous practices there. That's what we need to be most concerned about, as well as obviously ourselves and indeed players who may want to show their support for the LGBT people. What happens if they wear rainbow laces or a rainbow armband, which I very much hope they will? How will they be treated? So, you know, FIFA knew when they appointed Qatar that there was real concerns over human rights. There were pledges made for changes to be made which have not been realised. And we are as concerned as we've ever been about the lives of innocent people just for being who we are.
Yeah, really good to get your thoughts this morning. Thank you so much, Jane. Jane Ozan there, founder of the UK's Banned Conversion Therapy Coalition, and I believe we have a statement from the FA.
Yeah, we asked if someone would come and speak to us. They said no one was available. They've said for more than a year, they've been in dialogue with numerous human rights organisations, trade unions, non-governmental organisations to prepare for Qatar 2022 in order, they say, to get a balanced understanding of the key issues in the country and the wider region. And then they've gone on to say, while understanding there's still progress to be made in many areas domestically, the goal has been to learn how to best use our position as a national footballing governing body while ensuring the well-being of England fans, players and the support team. One of the big questions is, do we believe that they're doing that? Are they using their position to ensure the well-being of fans, players and the support team?
Yeah. What I would say is if Qatar wasn't hosting the World Cup, we wouldn't be talking about LGBTQ plus rights or human rights in Qatar. So maybe shining a spotlight on the issue.
Is that enough? Please join in the conversation. You can email us gbnews@gbnews.uk. Will you be watching the World Cup, or have you decided actually you don't want to have anything to do with it? Please do let us know. Actually, we can speak to Claire and David about that a little later.
Yes, and I'll be going to the World Cup covering it for GB News, so I will be telling you all about what it is like to be at the world's biggest sports tournament in such a small country with such a different culture to countries that have hosted it in the past. Keep your thoughts coming in this morning. Also keep them coming in about Rishi Sunak's new government as he prepares to face off against Labour in his first PMQs. Lots more to come on that. Stand by.
Good morning. I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest broadcast from the Met Office. Wednesday, sunny spells, scattered showers, blustery winds, but very mild for the time of year. Looking at the pressure pattern, and low pressure still dominates our weather as we move through the next few days, drawing in warm air from the near continent, but tightly packed isobars indicate quite brisk winds at times, particularly over the next 24 hours. So a gusty start to the day. Wednesday morning, sunny spells, scattered showers pushing their way north and eastwards, but it should slowly become a bit drier as we head through the morning. There will be a few scattered showers around, perhaps heavy at times, but most places staying dry. A blustery afternoon though, winds still gusting around 40-45 miles an hour around some western coasts. But a southerly direction with those winds means another warm day, 15, 16, 17 in the north, 18 to 20 Celsius across southern parts. So exceptionally mild for the time of year. Through into the evening, we'll see a few showers around, plenty of clear spells initially. Still very windy across the far northwest of Scotland, outbreaks of rain here. And then overnight, we'll see thicker clouds, some patchy rain starting to push northwards. This will stop the temperatures from dropping too low. Again, 12 to 16 Celsius for many. The average should be around 6 or 7. So a warm night to come. Thursday morning, quite a cloudy start, perhaps some sunny spells for Northern Ireland, southern Scotland initially, but patchy cloud and rain will push its way northwards through the day. The wind should ease as the day goes on, perhaps still a little blustery around the coast. And there will be some drier, brighter interludes at times, particularly across the south and the east. And where we see any spells of sunshine, it will lift temperatures into the low 20s, 21 Celsius possible, but mild for everyone, 15 to 17 Celsius, normally 14 or 15 as a high at this time of the year. It stays similar as we move towards the end of the week into the weekend, further blustery rain at times and temperatures staying on the mild side. See you again soon.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week. I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akua, on Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today.
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Every Saturday at 2 o'clock, join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain. I'm not afraid to give you a platform and say it how it is.
Come on, make the case. Something like this is very, very important to people.
And we're always up for a laugh on this show.
God, honestly, you'd think there were no problems in the world.
Real Britain, every Saturday on GB News.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
On radio and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Rishi Sunak pledges to fix Liz Truss's mistakes as he assembles his cabinet.
Well, a very good morning. Welcome back to the programme. It's just gone 8 o'clock on Wednesday, the 26th of October. This is Breakfast on GB News with Paul and myself, Rosie.
Our top story this morning, then, Rishi Sunak vowing to fix the mistakes of the previous government in his first speech as PM. Yesterday, he assembled a new cabinet, and that included Suella Braverman returning to government despite resigning days ago.
Well, Sunak's going to face off against the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, in the Commons at midday today. Of course, we'll bring that to you here on GB News in his first Prime Minister's Questions.
Elsewhere this morning, dock workers at one of the UK's largest container ports kick off 2 weeks of strikes today after talks collapsed in chaos. The industrial action at the port of Liverpool is likely to further disrupt the country's supply chain.
And from hiring to firing, Rishi Sunak may have brought together his top team, but what makes a great leader? We're going to be asking one entrepreneur for his top tips when it comes to being the boss.
Lots of you getting in touch with us this morning about Rishi Sunak's cabinet. Paula says, I actually think he has put together a great cabinet, although she did want Boris back in the cabinet.
Anne is unhappy that one person isn't in it, who says Jacob Rees-Mogg is a real Tory and should be offered a post. He's the most knowledgeable.
Keep them coming in, GB Views at gbnews.uk or at GB News.
Welcome back to the programme. So, Rishi Sunak has used his first speech as Prime Minister to pledge that he'll fix the mistakes of Liz Truss's premiership and says he's going to restore integrity to government.
I want to pay tribute to my predecessor, Liz Truss. She was not wrong to want to improve growth in this country. It is a noble aim. And I admired her restlessness to create change. But some mistakes were made.
The PM's new cabinet assembled yesterday. It contains many of the same faces from the previous ones, including the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, controversially, some might say reappointed after being forced to resign just days ago.
Well, the Chancellor remains Jeremy Hunt, who took over from Kwasi Kwarteng in an attempt to calm markets. He'll stay in the post.
As does the Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly.
Well, Sunak's going to face his first real public challenge today when he goes head-to-head with the Labour leader at Prime Minister's Questions. That will be at 12 o'clock. We'll bring it to you here. But let's get more analysis on how that first cabinet meeting will get underway. Let's go to Downing Street, where our political correspondent Tom Harwood is waiting for us. Tom, a very good morning to you. A new start, a fresh start, a new cabinet. Talk us through some of the dynamics of it.
Yes, and first of all, talking about Prime Minister's Questions, it looks like Prime Minister's Questions preparations are already underway. Around an hour ago, we saw Michael Gove, followed by Oliver Dowden, enter the door behind me. Now, Michael Gove and Oliver Dowden had been out of the cabinet for a little while, brought back in by Rishi Sunak. Clearly, they will be talking over potentially what is going to be a pretty defining moment at midday today. Rishi Sunak's first Prime Minister's Questions, no doubt with some pretty tough forensic questioning, as people like to describe it, from Sir Keir Starmer. But before all that, of course, a cabinet meeting as well a little bit later this morning, expecting that in around an hour or so. So we'll see a lot more familiar faces walk up the street behind me. But crucially, there are a big number of people who served in Liz Truss's cabinet who no longer are in government. At least 11 were announced yesterday, and this morning there is still a big question mark over some of those former ministers who have now not been appointed new jobs. So, for example, Anne-Marie Trevelyan, former Transport Secretary. There's been no statement that she's left government. However, we've got a new Transport Secretary. So where exactly is she now? Similarly, Michael Ellis, who was Attorney General. Well, now there's a new Attorney General, but we don't know whether Michael Ellis has left government or not. The same goes for Chris Philp, the former Chief Secretary to the Treasury. Now there's a new Chief Secretary to the Treasury, but we don't know the position of Chris Philp. So it could be more than 11 sackings from Liz Truss's cabinet. It could be anywhere up to 15 or 16 sackings. So quite a big clear out of the people who were in government before, but crucially, some big names kept. And we were going through just some of them, some allies of Boris Johnson, like James Cleverly, and indeed an ally of Liz Truss, her former Deputy Prime Minister Therese Coffey there too. So this attempt at a unity cabinet, but let's not deny how big a clear out there was yesterday afternoon.
Thanks, Tom. That's our political correspondent, Tom Harwood. Joining us now is the Conservative councillor for Epping and Thaden in Essex, Holly Whitbread. Holly, very good morning to you. Would you have brought Suella Braverman back into the cabinet?
I think she's got a big job to do, and I think Suella's been recognised as someone who really identifies the issues, first of all, in terms of frontline policing and the real challenges there, but also the challenges around illegal immigration and tackling those channel crossings as well.
But what about the fact that he came forward and he said, you know, mistakes have been made, I'm going to go forward and earn your trust with integrity. And some people will say, well, what she did last week didn't showcase integrity at all.
I think it is a difficult one, and obviously I'm sure that at some point Rishi or a representative of the government will come out and justify that. But what I would say is that kind of allies of Suella are saying that it was quite a small mistake, and she is someone who recognised that mistake, resigned for that mistake, put her hands up, and actually, as I said before, she does recognise those huge challenges, and obviously Rishi felt that she was the right lady for the job.
Yeah, anyone in the cabinet that you thought, not sure about that appointment?
Not really, actually. I was actually quite impressed by what a broad church it was. I mean, I am probably of the kind of James Cleverly wing of the party, so I was really pleased to see him in there. Also, Ben Wallace, who I think is someone who's conducted himself very well in recent years. So I think there was a real kind of a mixture of political views, but also kind of people who have been on different teams as well. So the unity is key, really.
Talking about different teams, Penny Mordaunt didn't get a promotion.
No. I think it's interesting. I mean, actually, Penny has done a really good job in that Leader of the House role, so I think she's probably very well suited to it. She did very well throughout the mourning period for the Queen, so, you know, she's...
Should she have been given a department, though?
Perhaps. I mean, I'm sure in a year or so's time she might get an opportunity to do a different role, but I can see why Rishi made that decision, because she's done a good job in recent weeks.
To what extent have the positions that he's put in place give us a hint at the direction that he's going to take policy?
I think it's interesting that actually when he was on the steps of Downing Street yesterday, he kept referring to the 2019 manifesto, which really is his mandate. So I think what we will see is a focus on some of those priorities. So 20,000 police officers, kind of really focusing on frontline policing, investing in the NHS. And I think that is reflected in the cabinet positions, but also in terms of the economic challenges we face, that stability that is required with Jeremy Hunt really kind of remaining in place to kind of keep the market's confidence.
Yeah, the other message that they're going to take into the next general election, there are going to be spending cuts, right? There simply isn't the money to go round that there was. How do you feel about having to take that message out there to doorsteps when you're campaigning and to the grassroots?
Well,
difficult to sell.
It is difficult to sell, but we do need responsible government. Obviously, during COVID, quite rightly, we had to spend huge amounts of money. This energy price guarantee that we've seen is also a hugely expensive piece of legislation, which is very much needed, but we do have to run government in a sensible and responsible way. And I think kind of being fiscally responsible is kind of a key pillar of conservatism.
Yeah.
He said difficult decisions are coming. What do you think they're going to be?
I don't know. I mean, I imagine with Jeremy Hunt staying as Chancellor, they'll be looking at kind of, as Jeremy Hunt said last week, kind of across the board. I know there's been a huge kind of focus on defence and making sure that we continue to invest, particularly with the situation in Ukraine, and obviously that kind of key priority now, making sure people can pay their energy bills. So it will be interesting to see what kind of difficult decisions are made.
Yeah, would you stick to 3% of GDP, as Ben Wallace wants, by 2030?
Personally, I would.
Yeah,
I think it's the situation we're facing internationally is hugely challenging, and I think we've always got to kind of keep an eye on Russia, but also other international challenges.
Would you uprate benefits in line with inflation or wages?
I think it's a difficult one. And I think actually what's interesting about that cabinet is there'd be different voices around the table. And I'm kind of interested to hear the arguments of all sides. So
you did very well at avoiding the actual answer.
I'm not completely convinced on either yet. So I want to hear the arguments before kind of making a decision on it. I mean, I am very aware that people have got a high tax burden. So people are worried about that. But people are also kind of worried about the state of the economy and they will need that money coming in as well.
Yeah, difficult decisions to be made, which is exactly what Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt said. Thank you, Holly. Really appreciate your time this morning.
Well, let's look at the economy in a little bit more detail and some tentative good news. UK government borrowing costs fell across global markets to pre-mini budget levels when news emerged that Rishi Sunak was going to become Prime Minister.
But top UK economist Thomas Pugh says a deeper recession is on the cards under Rishi Sunak's economic approach.
Let's find out more. Our South East of England reporter Ellie Costello is with Thomas now. Very good morning to both of you.
Yes, good morning to you, Paul, and good morning to you, Rosie. First full day of work today for Rishi Sunak. We're going to hear from him later at PMQs. But of course, he's coming into a very full in-tray. We're talking about the cost of living crisis, energy bills, Ukraine war, and of course, stabilising the economy, which has been very unsettled since the mini budget, but already signs that the markets could have begun to pick up. So let's speak now to Tom Pugh, who is a UK economist. We are now at RSM UK, which is a leading accountancy firm in the City of London. So, Tom, first of all, what do we know about Rishinomics and how is that going to impact the economy?
So Rishi Sunak's number one priority is going to be restoring some credibility with the financial markets. Jeremy Hunt's already gone, already started to do that. Rishi Sunak's going to continue. That's what that medium-term fiscal statement we're going to get on Monday is really all about. Unfortunately for the economy and for businesses and households, it probably means some spending cuts and it probably means some tax rises in order to convince financial markets that they have control of the public finances and that the debt to kind of GDP ratio is on a downward track over the medium term.
So when Rishi Sunak talks about difficult decisions being made, what is he talking about?
So he's really referencing taxes are going to have to go up in some areas. There's going to be a very, very tight kind of spending round. It's going to be difficult to find places that you can really cut spending, given how kind of tight government budgets have been over the last few years. And that's what he means when there's difficult decisions to make.
Are we heading towards austerity?
I think we probably are in for a period of austerity over the next probably couple of years. There's some leeway as to when the austerity package is going to fall and when that will hit the economy. But I think in order to convince financial markets that they have the public finances under control, it's going to mean cuts in spending, tax rises, and that basically is a period of austerity.
Yeah, difficult decisions to be made. How are the markets reacting to Rishi Sunak becoming Prime Minister? Because the cost of government borrowing has actually fallen, hasn't it?
Yeah, so essentially since Jeremy Hunt took over as Chancellor, we've seen financial markets start to pick up. That continued with Rishi Sunak becoming Prime Minister. They've essentially now back to where they were before Liz Truss took over as Prime Minister. So that's, the cost of government borrowing, for example, is a lot higher than it was a few months ago, but it's lower than it was kind of a couple of weeks ago at the height of the kind of chaos.
So that is some good news. What do you predict will happen with interest rates now? Because they have hiked in recent months and affected many people, especially with their mortgage repayments.
So I think it partly depends on what happens on Monday. If we get a package of tax rises and spending cuts, that will lessen the pressure on the Bank of England to really hike up interest rates. So I think we are going to see some interest rate hikes. So we might see interest rates go up by 75 base, so 3/4 of a percentage point in November, probably a little bit more in December. But I don't think we're going to see the kind of 5.5% that the financial markets were fearing a couple of weeks ago.
Well, Tom Pugh, really, really good to get your thoughts here this morning at RSM. Well, there you go. You heard there from Thomas Pugh, UK economist, the interest rates he doesn't think are going to spike as much as we thought previously, but we are already in a recession, perhaps going into a deeper recession than once thought. But these are steps, he says, are necessary in order to get us out of the economic situation that we find ourselves in.
Ellie, thank you very much, our national reporter there, bringing us the latest analysis on what the economists make of Rishi Sunak at the helm. Well, lots of you getting in touch as well. Morning to Catherine, who says, it's beyond me how you can continually report or comment that our new Prime Minister doesn't or won't know how to support the lower earners and people on benefits. Have you forgotten his parents owned a chemist? I'm sure they faced hardships. Can we at least give him a chance?
Which is a fair point, Catherine, because he does come from a background where his parents had to make their own money. Now, though, the critics would say he's worth £730 million along with his, billionaire wife, etc. And so is he out of touch with people? And, of course, that's why he's an unproven campaigner. That'll be interesting to see once we do get to a general election, whether he has that connection with voters from all parts of the country in the same way that Boris Johnson did.
And good morning to Peter as well, who says, I'm no fan of Sunak. In my book, the only decent thing he's done is reappoint Suella, who is showing signs of being the Home Secretary we need. He needs to ensure he backs her 100%.
Keep them coming in, GB Views at gbnews.uk or at GB News. It's 17 minutes past 8. Let's bring you up to date with what is happening this morning, then.
Well, the new Prime Minister has held talks with the First Ministers of Scotland and Wales. Now, in talks with Nicola Sturgeon and Mark Drakeford, Rishi Sunak is said to have emphasised the UK's shared challenges. And Nicola Sturgeon concluded that the talks had been constructive.
Around 7 in 10 NHS trusts are failing to meet their targets for cancer referrals. In England, the current maximum wait time for a hospital appointment for suspected cancer is 2 weeks. NHS England says 93% of patients should be seen within this time frame, but the latest data shows this target is routinely not being met.
Northern Ireland businesses are facing what they've described as a tipping point, with 1 in 5 businesses reportedly struggling. The president of the Northern Ireland Chamber has called this week pivotal in ending Stormont's political stagnation. Well, the Northern Ireland Secretary has warned he will call assembly elections if Stormont isn't restored by Friday.
Ukrainian President Zelensky will be watching our new PM closely, having enjoyed a close relationship with former PM Boris Johnson.
Well, there's speculation that Rishi Sunak may abandon the defence spending pledge of 3% of GDP. Let's find out more. The Telegraph's Defence and Foreign Affairs editor, Con Coughlin, joins us now. Very good morning to you. Boris Johnson was very much on the front foot in terms of his relationship with Zelensky and his profound support of Ukraine. Is Rishi Sunak going to follow suit in the same way, and can he afford to?
Well, firstly, Rishi Sunak has spoken to President Zelensky. It was one of the first things he did after he became Prime Minister yesterday, and he's pledged support. But I fear that just like Boris Johnson, he's going to talk the talk. But when it comes to giving defence the extra funds it needs to be a proper deterrent force in terms of the overall Russian threat, I think he's going to back away from that. Boris Johnson did not commit to more money for defence in any meaningful way. It was other people in the Johnson cabinet that were calling for the 3% level of defence spending. Rishi Sunak has never really committed himself to that kind of level, which would see some pretty significant increases in defence spending over the next decade, and would get us properly fighting fit to deal with the Russian threat and other threats such as China. So, but there'll be other people in the cabinet. I think James Cleverly, Ben Wallace, who's been retained as Defence Secretary, and even Jeremy Hunt, who, when he was Foreign Secretary back in the day, was calling for a significant uplift in defence spending. It'd be very interesting to see how this plays out. I think we have the makings of the first major cabinet row within the first day of the Rishi Sunak government.
Can you understand the argument, though, that there's a 40 billion black hole in the country's finances, and that there is an argument that we've put so much money into Ukraine, seems to be a never-ending war, and as important as that is, that money could be used to build more hospitals?
Well, people will make those arguments, but this is a far more fundamental issue about freedom and democracy. And if we allow tyrants, despots like Vladimir Putin to go around Europe annexing territory and killing people, then our whole way of life is under threat. And it's not just from rising gas prices. So it is a balance. But the amount of money we've given to Ukraine in the course of this conflict since February is relatively modest compared with the overall budget. It's in the low billions, if that. So, it's a question of balancing the books. We spend money, do we need to have HS2, for example, which seems to be the most enormous drain on the public purse? There are a whole range of issues you can look at. But I personally think that, we've got to man up, so to speak, in terms of our defensive capabilities. We've now got the smallest army since before the Napoleonic Wars, and we're cutting the army still further in terms of its size at a time when we've got a major war going on in the soil of Europe. It's ludicrous, and it shouldn't be allowed to persist.
Do you think Ben Wallace could potentially step down if Rishi Sunak does not stick to that 3% target?
Well, it's a good point, and clearly, I think it's one of the big political cards that Mr. Wallace thinks he has in his back pocket. But of course, if he did that, I think that will be the end of his political career. He's played a very clever game during the political musical chairs of the summer, and he's kept the defence brief. And I think he wants the defence brief. And I imagine he will get some kind of compromise. He might not get 3% of GDP on defence spending, but he might get 2.5% or commitments of further spending. So, I mean, I think, as I said, there's a big political game coming down the tracks on defence spending. And my hunch is Ben Wallace will stay in place.
Con, thank you very much for your analysis this morning. Appreciate your time.
Pleasure.
Right now, 24 minutes past 8. Keep your views coming in. Rishi Sunak has said difficult decisions are to come. Should that mean decisions on how much we spend on defence? gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Yeah, coming up, we'll find out what the Labour Party thinks of Rishi Sunak's new cabinet. Stand by.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
On radio,
And online.
we're proud to be
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back. It's coming up to 8:30. Still to come here on Breakfast at 8:45. As Rishi Sunak assembles his new cabinet, we're going to be speaking to an entrepreneur about what makes a good leader.
And then at 9:15 we'll meet Mick Jagger's former nanny, not his actual nanny, she's not that old, his children's nanny, who became rock and roll's first female tour manager for bands like the Rolling Stones, also Lynyrd Skynyrd and The Who.
And lots of you getting in touch this morning. Please keep them coming in. Your views on whether it's how do we solve the staffing shortages in the NHS, or what do you make of Rishi Sunak's new cabinet? GBviews at gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us too at gbnews.
It's 8:28. A new report from Labour has recommended a revolution in learning and skills to achieve sustainable economic growth.
Well, the report also calls on the government to deal with what they say is the critical need to invest in growth and productivity.
Joining us now is Shadow Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson. Morning to you, Bridget. First of all, just very quickly, just tell us what Labour would do when it comes to investing in learning and skills, and where would the money for this come from? How much would it cost?
Labour's plan for growth, and the difference in our approach with the Conservatives is we think that growth in our economy comes from working people and businesses who make that impact. So we would reform the apprenticeships levy, we would make it easier for people to upskill and retrain throughout their working lives, and we'd also support employers to make sure that we're creating more apprenticeships. I think that's incredibly important. We'd also reform our childcare system, so we deliver a modern childcare system so that working parents are able to take on the jobs and hours that they want, not forced into making choices about how much childcare they can afford. We do need to see a real shift in our economy, and we've seen a real drop-off both in apprenticeship starts but also in adult learning under the last 12 years of the Conservatives.
Let's talk about the economy if we can. It seems as though there's been a little bit of a pause, a little bit of stability with the appointment of Rishi Sunak as Prime Minister and his new cabinet. What do you think about the state of the economy and the plan, as the Conservatives say, for growth?
Of course, the Conservatives crashed our economy, and we're in a terrible situation now as a country, facing, that black hole that they've created. And we still don't actually fully know the scale of the damage because they've refused to publish the report from the Office of Budget Responsibility that would give us that information. But there is no plan for growth. We've had terrible growth under the Conservatives for the last 12 years, and in fact under Rishi Sunak, who was Chancellor for a significant period of that. I don't think we're going to see more stability, unfortunately, back in the government. It is what our country desperately needs, but I think we're only going to get that with the general election, where the British people can have their say about how our country moves forward, not just Conservative MPs who've had now, 3 Conservative Prime Ministers in 3 months.
Rishi Sunak's acknowledged that difficult decisions are going to have to be made, and we're anticipating that Conservative government will cut spending and raise taxes. I'm sure all of this will be deeply unpopular. If there was a general election, which we don't think there will be, what would Labour's alternative to that plan be?
Well, it's all very good and well Rishi Sunak talking about tough choices, but these are tough choices that his party has caused when they crashed the economy. That's the reason that we're talking about deep spending cuts. We weren't a month ago, so it's the black hole that they have created. But where it comes to the approach that Labour would take, we think we need to build a fairer, modern economy with jobs created in every corner of our country. So, we do face the challenge around climate change, but it's also a brilliant opportunity to create highly skilled jobs in every corner of our country. But if we're going to do that, we have to invest in the people that will make that happen. And that's why we do need to see a real shift where it comes to skills, but also changes in our school system too. So we would end the tax breaks that private schools enjoy, and we put that money into a brilliant state education. I think that's a really straightforward area where Rishi Sunak could raise some money to fund education.
Yeah, but that's not going to fund the kind of money that we're talking about in and of itself. We reckon there'll be about a £40 billion black hole. The decisions that a Labour government would have to make are the same that any government would have to face. Where would spending cuts come?
Well, as I say, the reason that we've got that black hole is because the Tories crashed the economy. So it is down to them. They've caused this problem. But the approach that we would take would be different. So we'd end that charitable status for private schools. That's £1.7 billion. We'd bring in a windfall tax on oil and gas companies who've made such record profits during this crisis that we're seeing. And we'd end the non-dom tax status too. So we'd be looking at different ways that we could have a fairer tax system. Because I think it's only right that if there are tough choices to be made, tough choices that they've caused, then then they shouldn't take those options off the table. But I think it really does remain to be seen whether they'll even consider any of those options. I think they absolutely should, because it would get us a long way.
Just very quickly, Prime Minister's questions will be happening at 12 o'clock today. Keir Starmer will go face-to-face with the new Prime Minister for the first time. We're expecting there to be quite a clamour of calls for a general election, but as we know, the Conservatives aren't going to call for one. So is this an opportunity for the opposition to really get in on the detail now of how you would govern differently to be a really credible opposition and potential government in waiting?
I think this is a great opportunity for us to set out the change and the difference that a Labour government would make. So investing in skills, investing in the green jobs of the future and making that shift right across our country. But I think you do also see, people do want an election. Everywhere I go, people say that they want the chance to have their say. They've been denied that by the Conservatives, and we're not going to stop calling for it.
Appreciate your time this morning. Thank you, Bridget. That's Bridget Phillipson, Shadow Education Secretary for Labour. Do let us know what you thought about what she had to say, especially when we pushed her there on the figures, because she was talking about 1.7 billion from ending the charitable status on private schools. There's a 40 billion black hole. So Labour would have to either raise taxes or borrow more money. But as you can see, she didn't want to answer that.
The people with lots of opinions will be joining us just after the break. Will be David Mellor and Claire Muldoon. We'll be rifling through them in a second.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
On Mark Dolan tonight, we have a simple plan, which is to inform, stimulate and entertain in equal measure. It's all about getting your opinions on the national television airwaves. I love my viewer emails, mark@gbnews.uk. So do join me from 9 p.m. to midnight every Friday, Saturday and Sunday for big guests, big opinions and a big presenter. 6'5", don't you know? See you then on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christys, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Join me, Arlene Foster, for The Briefing on GB News. Every Friday at 3 p.m, I'll give you all the latest political news and analysis, and we'll have robust live debate. To make sure that you're caught up on all of the biggest issues of the day, we'll bring on experts in their field. I'll ask the questions that you'd like to ask. We're not afraid to tackle discussions from all perspectives, including yours. Don't forget, The Briefing with me, Arlene Foster, every Friday at 3 p.m. on GB News.
Very good morning.
8:37. We're going to go through the papers now with David Mellor and Claire Muldoon, who need no introduction. David Mellor complaining about the levity in the studio.
Yes.
Why?
Because that's something to say, isn't it?
It's better than levitating.
It's something to say.
Well, we're talking lots of mince before, weren't we? No, let's
I think you've had enough bolognese.
Yes, before we get into bolognese or chili con carne, actually yesterday on the programme we were eating an alternative ragu that was made with insects rather than beef. I would have liked to see you two try it. It was
quite a life you lead.
Well, I'm not.
Very envious.
I'm not sure.
Were you just practising for I'm a Celebrity?
Absolutely not. Should we turn our attentions to more serious matters and go to some international news? Claire, why don't we start with you in the Times?
Yeah.
Let's talk about this NATO's approach to Putin.
Now, this is quite an interesting op-ed by Roger Boyce here in the Times. And as we've said before, because print is now on its way out, news we don't get from print, what we get are opinions. And as you know, in May, Finland and Sweden applied to NATO. And their application has been blocked because of Turkey. Erdogan, the president of Turkey, sees himself as a huge ally to Putin. And not only did he was first out of the blocks to wish Putin a happy 70th birthday earlier on this month, but he's also taking money from the Russians, allowing them to buy up property in Turkey. Now, what's the British view on this? Well, Ben Wallace in May said, assured us all, as Defence Secretary, as he still is Defence Secretary, he said, look, there is definitely a way through this and we will get together and we will get this done. But we're now pushing November and they're still not ratified in terms of NATO alliance.
I thought they weren't going to ratify it, but then they agreed they would do once they sorted out a deal, because this involved the Kurdish aspect, didn't it? Which I think, was it Kurdish political prisoners that were being held in Sweden and Finland? Turkey wanted them.
Yeah. Well, it's going on. I think there's any excuse, right? I think we've passed that one, blocked that one. It's a bit like making the menopause now the new buzzword of the moment. So we need to keep our eye on this, because I was looking back Ben Wallace's tweets. 2020, he was discussing the issues that Turkey had with NATO. And can NATO get rid of countries? And if so, why aren't they getting rid of Turkey? Because they seem to be stumbling blocking all the time. And I think Turkey is a very strategic post for NATO. It's a strategic post not only for the rest of the NATO alliance, but also for Russia.
David?
I think the problem with Turkey is that it is in such a strategic place. It's hard to do without them. And it is, big inside the tent, what's sitting out, as against outside the tent, what's sitting in. I think that the problem, of course, is that Erdogan is emboldened by being allowed to get away with it. If, for instance, these two Scandinavian countries are determined to join NATO, it would be appalling to allow Turkey to block it. And of course, what NATO could quite simply do is just disallow Turkey's vote. I think throwing Turkey out probably does more harm than good. But what you cannot have is, a fairly primeval character like Erdogan being allowed to block progress when the decision of two major Scandinavian countries to join up with NATO is a huge victory.
I'm surprised
previously they didn't want to do so.
Erdogan actually has the support, because I was in Turkey with my daughters in September, and talking to the locals, he's got absolutely no support at all, because of the runaway inflation that they have there and the absolute state of the country.
But you were in a populous place that was open to international influence. Of course, an awful lot of Turkey is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a classic divided society.
Yeah, and that's where there are a lot of Kurds.
Yes, exactly.
In the meantime, if you're watching us, we've got live pictures of the new cabinet arriving into Number 10 for their first cabinet meeting of the new Rishi Sunak team that he's reshuffled. We'll come back to more of the politics of the day shortly. Let's just return, if we can, now, David, to the Mail, because while we're looking at the sort of infrastructure and the jigsaw of how NATO decide who can or can't join and why or why not that's been delayed, Russia's making even more emboldened claims and taking their claims to Ukraine, now to the UN.
I mean, it's amazing the face that they have. Extraordinary that this country that behaves in such an uncivilized way is a NATO, is a UN, is able to block anything that can go through the UN because it's got the power of veto. This is a worrying story because Russia are going to the UN about a so-called dirty bomb. And their allegation is that this dirty bomb has been concocted by America and the UK with Ukraine, and that dirty bomb is a threat. Well, I don't believe that we are involved in making a dirty bomb. So the question is, what is Putin trying to tell us here? It could be that he's trying to tell us that he's got a dirty bomb, that he will let that dirty bomb off and then blame the Ukrainians and their Western allies for it. I mean, this is a really serious worry. What Putin will do, and has been for months now, what he will do if he really feels he's losing this war. Well, he is losing this war. So what's he going to do? And at what point does he feel that, you know, he's not only got to talk the talk, he's got to walk the walk? So far, he's talked about using nuclear weapons and stuff like that. Most people don't believe he would, and he hasn't. But is that happy state of affairs going to continue? Who can say?
I think that's another reason why Ben Wallace was kept on, actually, because remember, he had a very quick dash over to Washington not that long ago to discuss this whole issue surrounding the Ukraine war, Putin, etc., etc. And I think Sunak was right for a modicum of continuation to keep him there.
Well, let's talk about the new cabinet, and in particular that of the Chancellor. If we look at the Telegraph, David, this fiscal statement, we've had the mini-budget, then we had a new Chancellor, we got a little bit of stabilisation in the markets yesterday, and now, potentially, this big date we've been looking forward to, the 31st, where we're going to get this very unsexily termed medium-term fiscal statement, could now be delayed.
And that's just appeared online, and the Foreign Secretary has suggested that. I mean, I don't think it's a bad idea, actually, because what we're talking about is setting a framework for public expenditure that the government will then have to adhere to over what, for this government, is quite a long time, 2 years, more than the 2 minutes of previous occasions. So what has to happen is that in a very limited amount of time, they have to show some fiscal discipline. You see, Boris was a chuck money at everything man. And this was why Boris was so unsuited to these times.
But Sunak was Chancellor and he did it.
Yeah, well, that's the point. Yeah, Sunak was Chancellor and he did it. And he shouldn't have done it. And that was really a far better reason for having reservations about Sunak than this nonsense that he somehow brought down Boris, when in the real world, everyone knows only one person brought down Boris, and his name was Boris, yes.
Well, Cleverly has been speaking this morning and has said, when asked if the budget was going to be delayed, he said, well, it may well do. That date was set by the previous Prime Minister. I don't know whether we're able to stick to that.
Now, can I tell you one thing that I think is so important? In the golden era of Mrs. Thatcher, which wasn't that golden, but we can look back on it as a golden era, ministers were not allowed to say things like that. And she had a real terror as a press secretary, and if you got a call from him, you knew you were in big trouble. Because, you know, what is so anarchic, has been so anarchic about recent Conservative governments, and he's really got to do something about this, our new Prime Minister. You cannot have the Foreign Secretary going on the air and saying that we're not going to have a financial statement next week. It's a bit...
leave it to the Chancellor.
Of course.
Yes,
there has to be some kind of discipline. I mean, what government needs is discipline.
So you would say foolishly rather than cleverly, then?
Oh, very good. And on that note,
Bet, are you competing with Paul?
Is that it? Are we now being slung out?
Have you got not just yet, because there is a story that we wanted to talk about this morning. And who are we seeing there walking up to? This is a live shot of Downing Street. That is not a member of the cabinet, I don't think, is it?
I don't
think so.
But she might be in before the end of the day. You never know.
But yeah, we are looking at live shots as the Cabinet gather for their first meeting, proper meeting this morning. So we'll stay on that shot. But we did want to talk about a story that's in some of the papers this morning. The world's dirtiest man.
Yeah, I mean, we're not talking like dirtiest as in misogynist.
No, we mean
dirty.
actually literally unclean.
Filthy of the unclean.
Yes.
The dirtiest man in the world.
And we've got a picture of him,
91.
I think.
Yeah, on the Telegraph, there's
there
a picture there. That's him there. He's Iranian. He was nicknamed the dirtiest man in the world, and he's died aged 94. Do you know why he? Well, we don't know why he's died. But the body
having had a
being
bath
examined this year. But after going for years and years and years without washing, the local community thought that had enough, and he'd existed on complete roadkill, nothing else.
His favourite food was porcupine, apparently.
Apparently. So he never married, had no family, and was viewed with some affection by other villagers. But the problem was he had a shower. Not long after he had the shower, unfortunately,
he passed away. Apparently. And yeah, he ate porcupine, rotten meat and unsanitary water from an old oil can.
And sometimes
defying, and he smoked
four cigarettes at a time.
At once, like that. 4 cigarettes.
He lived to 96.
Yeah, and he lived to 96. What do you think about that, David?
I can't take it in, you know. I mean, words fail.
Defying medical science.
I have no bolognese for this.
No bolognese for that. Are you a shower or a bath man? Because apparently you took a shower and then you...
I'm a shower man.
You're a shower man, are you?
I like to get in and out as quickly as I can.
Yeah.
Right, let's move on, shall we?
Let's take an early bath.
And David, thank you very much for joining us this morning with a rather... a colourful variety of stories this morning. Right now, coming up to 10 minutes to 9, let's bring you up to date with the other stories of the day. And the new Prime Minister has held talks with the First Ministers of Scotland and Wales. While speaking with Nicola Sturgeon and Mark Drakeford, Sunak is said to have emphasised the UK's shared challenges. And Sturgeon apparently concluded that the talks had been constructive.
Joe Biden, the US President, has reaffirmed that the UK is the United States' closest ally on a call with the new PM Rishi Sunak. The two leaders also discussed the war in Ukraine and will meet at the G20 in Indonesia in the coming weeks.
Northern Ireland businesses are facing what they've described as a tipping point. 1 in 5 of the businesses is reportedly struggling. Well, the president of the Northern Ireland Chamber has called this week pivotal in ending Stormont's political stagnation. Well, the Northern Ireland secretary's warned this week that he will call assembly elections if Stormont isn't restored by Friday.
Rishi Sunak then has officially appointed his new cabinet, who will be entering Downing Street shortly. They'll be making their way in through the famous front door. It's a collection of members from all sides of the party as he attempts to heal the divisions that have torn it apart.
Now, traditionally, a new Prime Minister fires cabinet ministers from their Commons office in Parliament before appointments are then made from Downing Street.
In light of this, we're speaking to entrepreneur Alex Proud about what makes a good leader and the best practices for hiring and firing. Alex, morning to you.
Good morning.
Difficult conversations, one would imagine, with Rishi Sunak, especially when he was letting those ministers go from cabinet yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, I think telling anyone that you no longer need their services is always awkward. I think the English are probably particularly bad at it. It's best done by getting directly to the point and being fairly brief. At the end of the day, no one wants to have an in-depth conversation about exactly why they're no good at their job anymore and why they're no longer needed. Yeah. I think politics is probably slightly different in the sense there's probably who wouldn't enjoy firing Jacob Rees-Mogg? That would probably be quite a pleasant experience. But, you know, it's a different situation because people are often... There are knives going in backs, there are battles that are being fought, and there are feuds that are being ended. So I suspect there's more pleasure in politically firing someone, and also knowing at the end of the day, you're not really dumping them from the job. They're still an MP, they still have a salary, so there's not quite the guilt you have when you actually have to let someone go.
Yeah, they'll still be able to go home and feed their families and put food on the table. But also they're doing jobs that they're not necessarily qualified to do.
Well,
right?
I would probably go further than that. Quite often are quite self-evidently not qualified to do. I wouldn't want to mention the name Boris Johnson or Liz Truss there, but, you know, both seem to lack many of the qualities that someone in a company or an entrepreneur would think were vital. And let's start with... It's interesting, if you look at the last few prime ministers, each has some of the qualities, few have had all of them. So if you look at Liz Truss, I would start with intelligence. Intelligence is a really key quality, and Liz Truss, when you watch being interviewed, there was a blankness in the eyes and a delay to answering a question that made me, and I think many other people, question her basic intellectual ability. If you look at Boris Johnson, he was obviously self-evidently and wore it on his sleeve with his desire to quote Latin and classics at people who find that quite embarrassing, perhaps, if they don't share that knowledge, which is somewhat of a show-off thing to do. But he lacked other qualities. He was unable to delegate work to others. He was self-evidently lazy, but also tried to keep all the power to himself, even though he didn't want to work on that power. And as a result, he didn't achieve much. And you can go further back. Many of our recent prime ministers lacked a certain quality. Gordon Brown was a dreadful communicator.
What is Rishi Sunak lacking?
I don't know. I mean, if you speak to people, what's interesting is how many people who aren't Conservatives are relieved. You know, when I speak to all my friends or the people at work, which are much younger, everyone's just relieved that someone who seems to have some common sense and basic intellectual ability and a desire to do what's best for the country rather than what's best for himself seem to hold him in quite high esteem.
Is he personable?
I think he's personal enough. I think we've had too much personality in Boris, way too much. I think everyone's fed up with knowing all about Boris and his ego and his way of issuing. I think we'd all like to see a lot less personality and a lot more getting on with the job and being good at the job behind the scenes.
When you talk about businessmen and people who can run a company and who know about business delving into politics, I immediately thought of Donald Trump. What did you make of his presidency?
Well, I mean, it was a self-evident disaster. And I think Donald Trump's business, let's not forget, was built on lies, which is demonstrably so. So he lied about his values of his company to borrow money to buy property, which went up in value.
He would deny that, of course.
He would, but at the moment, you know, according to the FBI, that's a fairly clear-cut case, and I don't particularly feel...
Well, they're investigating. He hasn't been convicted.
I would feel fairly confident in my assumptions, and such that I would say it on national TV and not be worried I'm about to get sued by anyone anytime soon. I don't think many businessmen would call Donald Trump a businessman as such. I think he built an empire based on lies. I think that we have a problem in British politics that most MPs now have no experience of business. It's been a long time since you had people, the old days, where businessmen who would get to a certain age would go, I now wish to devote my life to making Britain better.
Rishi Sunak's only been an MP for 7 years. You know, he's got experience as a hedge fund manager. He talks a lot about his upbringing and his parents' jobs. So maybe he does have enough of a sort of a spectrum of experience.
I would completely agree with that. He actually has some real-world common sense. I'm not sure all of us are over the moon about being a hedge fund manager, but it's better than most of them who have just done PR or come up through the ranks doing favours and crawling up people's backs. And I think the only thing that worries me a little bit about him is when we look at the way he handled the lockdown. I'm nervous that he stuck to his guns for the second and third rounds of lockdowns and didn't seem to change things and listen to evidence, empirical evidence. He stuck to what he did in the first place. I'm worried that we never had an economic analysis of lockdown policy. So I hope he can learn from mistakes. One of most British leaders' huge inabilities to say, I got that wrong, I want to learn, I want to change. I think that in leadership is vital to say, I got that wrong, I want to learn from my mistake and be better. Most of us think that's a key quality.
And just finally, before we let you go, Alex, you're an entrepreneur. What are your thoughts on this developing story this morning that the fiscal statement that was meant to be published on Monday is going to be delayed?
It's probably because it was a jolly embarrassing fiscal statement, I assume. You know, let's face it, that statement was based on a whole lot of policies that were going to be disastrous, according to pretty much every single economic expert in the world. It's rare to see every economist in the world agree that someone got it wrong.
That was the mini-budget. This is going to be a new fiscal statement. There'll probably be a round of spending cuts as well. They'll talk about tax rises.
I mean, it worries me because it worries me that the situation may be way worse than we think it is. It worries me that they're worried about confidence in bond markets, etc. And they're probably scared, senseless, that this fiscal statement might start the bond markets and everything else unravelling again. And that's terrifying for all of us with mortgages and with loans because it will be really bad for us.
All right. Thank you, Alex. Appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Right, lots to come here. We've been showing you a live shot of Downing Street. What are the conversations happening with that new cabinet as they get underway this morning? We'll be looking at that after the break.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akua, on Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today.
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Every Saturday at 2 o'clock, join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain. I'm not afraid to give you a platform and say it how it is.
Come on, make the case. Something like this is very, very important to people.
And we're always up for a laugh on this show.
God, honestly, you'd think there were no problems in the world.
Real Britain, every Saturday on GB News.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio,
and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Rishi Sunak pledges to fix Liz Truss's mistakes as he assembles his new cabinet.
Good morning, it is 9 o'clock on Wednesday the 26th of October. This is Breakfast on GB News with Paul Hawkins and Rosie Wright, your top stories this morning.
Well, Rishi Sunak has vowed to fix the mistakes of the previous government in his first speech as Prime Minister. Yesterday, he assembled a new cabinet that saw Suella Braverman return to government despite resigning just days ago.
The PM will face off against the Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer in the Commons at midday today in his first Prime Minister's questions, which we will bring to you here on GB News.
Dock workers at one of the UK's largest container ports kick off 2 weeks of strikes today after talks collapsed in chaos. The industrial action at the Port of Liverpool is likely to further disrupt the country's supply chain. We're behind the picket line.
As ever, you can join in the conversation. We do love to hear from you. GB Views at gbnews.uk or at GB News.
Well, the new cabinet, the very fresh new cabinet, are meeting this morning. And then, of course, Rishi Sunak will head in front of everybody, behind the podium at Prime Minister's Questions to face off against Sir Keir Starmer. Well, let's find out about all the latest movements and how the new cabinet is going down. If we head to Downing Street, our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, is there for us. Darren, a couple of appointments in the cabinet have proved quite controversial, haven't they?
Indeed they have. Suella Braverman, most of all, Rosie, the Home Secretary. The new Home Secretary has literally, in the last minute or so, walked into Downing Street ahead of a cabinet meeting at 9:30 this morning. Why is it controversial? Well, first of all, she is a pretty controversial, had been Home Secretary, with some of her views, particularly on this issue of deporting asylum seekers to Rwanda and the viver that she wanted to do that, talking about how she'd dreamed of the fact of doing it. But I think more importantly is this idea that she had resigned last week as Home Secretary, having, she admitted herself, made a mistake by sharing some Cabinet Office documents to another MP and someone else she CC'd in, even though they were meant to be private and confidential. Now, at the time, the then Liz Truss government described this as essentially a breach of the ministerial code. It's why, in the end, she had to resign. And people are now asking this morning, given the fact that that happened literally less than a week ago, why is she back in Cabinet as Home Secretary, given the fact that Rishi Sunak stood in the podium in Downing Street behind me yesterday, saying that this will be a government of integrity, professionalism, and be held to the highest standards. And many feel that is that compatible. In the end, though, I think are Labour going to go on this? Is Sir Keir Starmer going to go on this at Prime Minister's Question Time a little later on today? I think you bet your bottom dollar he will, because for Labour, for the opposition parties, this gets to the heart of what they think of Rishi Sunak's new government, that it is all talk and no action, and in the end, they would argue he's as bad as his predecessors. Now, I think from Rishi Sunak's point of view, he would say Suella Braverman is a very capable politician. We share the same views, he would argue, when it comes to migration, including the implementation of that Rwanda plan, that she will get to grips with the crisis in the English Channel that, frankly, governments have been trying to get to grips with for the last couple of years, that she'll be an effective Home Secretary. Yes, that she made a mistake, that she owned up to it, that everyone deserves a second chance, and I suspect you'll get a pretty robust defence, if you like, from the new Prime Minister. All in all, when we talk about the reshuffle, though, it's largely quite similar faces to the ones that we've seen in previous positions. We've got people like Michael Gove back in, levelling up, Dominic Raab back in at Justice and as Deputy Prime Minister, and indeed lots of, actually, the Cabinet Ministers who served under Liz Truss, Rosie, are still in the same position. James Cleverly as Foreign Secretary, for example, the Northern Ireland Secretary, exactly the same, Chris Heaton-Harris, the Scottish Secretary, etc., etc., etc. So it will be an interesting first Cabinet meeting. We had the last one of Liz Truss only yesterday. We'll have the first one of Rishi Sunak's today. And then a big moment, his real, or a second test maybe, after the formation of that Cabinet, PMQs at midday. The second time he's come up against Keir Starmer at the dispatch box. He did it as Chancellor, I think, back in March of 2020. But this will be a very key moment for the new Prime Minister.
Thank you for that, Darren. Thank you for that analysis. We'll have all the build-up to PMQs at midday and all the reaction afterwards here on GB News. James Cleverly, by the way, the Foreign Secretary this morning, on Suella Braverman, saying she deserves a second chance as Home Secretary because she accepted her mistake and resigned. And on the issue of this developing story that the budget date, Monday's mid-term fiscal statement, could be delayed, Cleverly says it may well do. That date was set by the previous PM. I don't know whether we were able to stick to that. Let's speak to our business editor, Liam Halligan. Liam, first of all, just what do you make about this news that the Monday statement may be delayed?
Well, I advised them on the telly yesterday to do it because clearly the markets are calming down. Yeah. That Halloween day was always going to be very difficult to hit. What's needed now is as much detail as possible about the government's fiscal and financial plans going forward, and we don't want to do a rush job. And if you look at the borrowing costs now, the 10-year gilt yield, which ripples out across mortgage markets and personal loan costs and so on, the government's now borrowing money for 10 years at about 3.6%. Earlier, just before the weekend, when it looked like we'd still have a rather febrile Tory leadership contest, the government was having to pay 4.1%, 4.2%. So from 4.1, 4.2 down to 3.6, that's a major drop. And so the sense is that the government is back in control. The markets have calmed down a lot. The pound's up against the dollar again. It's $1.16 now. That's also due to the fact that US house prices haven't grown as quickly as thought. But this could be the government not just taking more time because that's the right thing to do, because these are complex ideas and he's just got a bunch of new people in, though of course the Chancellor stays the same. It's also the government saying to the markets and the world, OK, we're back in control. We're going to control the timetable now, not you.
It's still going to be a painful few months, and Rishi Sunak acknowledged yesterday difficult decisions are going to come. What do you think financially they're going to look like?
Well, yesterday we did a video presentation here on GB News, Rishi Sunak's profound economic challenges, and viewers can look at that on YouTube, GB News YouTube or the GB News app. But I think it may be that he has a bit of luck. And why do I say that? That's because European wholesale gas prices have been falling a lot. They went below yesterday €100 per megawatt hour for the first time since June, and wholesale gas prices are now lower than they were before Russia invaded Ukraine. Now, they're still higher, or twice as high as they've been on average over the last 10 years, but they're much lower, crucially, than they were when people were talking about this energy price cap costing the government £150 billion. Some of us said at the time it may cost the government nothing, and it may indeed end up costing the government nothing if gas prices remain at this level. And the good news is that people, families trying to make ends meet, thinking about their fuel bills, while the energy price cap is in place and will stay in place until April, and that's at roughly about £3,500 a year on average for the average household, and businesses are also protected, it may be, as long as there's not another massive geopolitical flare-up, not least involving Russia, because Europe has diversified, because we've been importing lots of what's called LNG, liquid natural gas. A lot of our European partners have been storing that. And also because we've been, frankly, using less energy. In Germany, some businesses have been rationed in terms of their energy use, steel makers and so on. It seems that the energy crunch might not be as tight as we previously thought. Also, October's been very mild.
Yes.
Now, the outlook could change if this is a particularly cold winter. But for now, at least, it looks as if the prospect of blackouts, which we've discussed here on GB News, and indeed rocketing fuel bills after April, that looks a little bit less likely than it did just a few days ago.
Really appreciate that. Good news. It's so nice to hear good news. Liam, thank you. Liam Halligan, our business editor there. So one of the other pressing issues for Rishi Sunak will be, of course, the State of the Union. He's vowed to work closely with home nations Scotland and Wales, speaking to both the countries' First Ministers in a telephone call last night.
Well, Nicola Sturgeon called the conversation with the Prime Minister constructive. Read into that what you will. Let's get the analysis, though, now of Scotland's Shadow Health Secretary, Dr Shandes Gillane. Thank you very much for speaking to us. What does constructive mean to you? How do you think that conversation really went?
Good morning. Well, look, I think the first thing that we need to say is that Rishi Sunak has reached out and is speaking to the devolved nations, and that's fantastic because we have two governments in Scotland and we need these two governments to start working together. Look, let me give you an example of what the UK government is doing. In Glasgow, in my region, they are levelling up. So on my podcast called Honey in Politics, I went out and I went and met Clyport, who are doing a Freeport bid. Now, if they get that, that's thousands of jobs, that's upskilling, that's carbon neutral, that's a lot of things that will be positive. And that is a good way of the United Kingdom government helping in Scotland. But also what we need to see from Nicola Sturgeon and her government is an end to grievance politics, an end to this childish, it's all the fault of the UK. But if we can get that, it'll be fantastic for Scotland.
Fantastic for Scotland is going to be relationships that are more harmonious than maybe the ones that Nicola Sturgeon's had in recent times. You know, there were some quite terse words between her and Liz Truss. What kind of relationship do you think she'll have with Rishi Sunak?
Rishi Sunak is a very serious politician, and you saw from his speech that he gave on the steps of Number 10. It was a time for, it was a gravitas that he came across. And so what you'll see is serious discussions, and Rishi Sunak will be able to have these very clear discussions. And look, big problems facing the country. The economy is the biggest one. But you can see in the conversation you had just earlier about how the markets are reacting to Rishi Sunak, the 10-year gilt bonds coming down, the interest rates coming down. That shows confidence in Rishi Sunak and his government. And I fully back Rishi Sunak, and I would like to see us working constructively to continue improving the economic outlook.
Going to handle the ever-growing calls for a second independence referendum?
Oh, look, Nicola Sturgeon wants a never-endum. You know, it's going to be. I want to have a vote until I get what I want. Look, we had our vote.
Supreme Court are deciding on whether she can hold it, so it may be a never-endum, but it could become a reality that Rishi Sunak will have to handle.
No, the court's not going to say that we can have a referendum. It's simply not going to do that. Look, it's not the time. What we need to do is concentrate on getting ourselves out of the cost of living crisis. We need to concentrate on getting ourselves back into economy which is working. Look, Scotland, let me just tell you what Nicola Sturgeon's done here. We pay higher taxes in Scotland than anywhere else in the UK because they put a penny on income tax. Now, that actually has meant they're taking less money than they were before. You know, they have no idea what to do with money. The idea of an independent Scotland with their independent economic plan that they produced, which was just a joke. It was a joke. So bad, actually, that the nationalists are fighting themselves right now about it. So, look, it's not going to happen. We don't need to have a referendum. We don't want a referendum. The majority of people don't want one in Scotland. Don't get fooled. And this is really important for your viewers. Don't get fooled into thinking that the SNP speak for Scotland, because they do not. We don't want independence. We actually want to work together.
Well, she would argue, if she were here, that there's a majority of pro-independence parties within the Scottish Parliament. Just before we let you go, do you think that Rishi Sunak was right to bring Suella Braverman back into the cabinet, even though she broke the ministerial code?
Well, actually, so it's interesting on that. So look, Suella Braverman was right to resign. She did break the code, but in 2015, Nicola Sturgeon did the same thing. So, there's a lot of hypocrisy going around. And Rishi Sunak knew that she
now recruited Nicola Sturgeon. It's more about Rishi Sunak saying he wants a cabinet that's going to prioritise integrity and honesty and trust. So, in that case, why would he then reappoint Suella Braverman?
So, Suella Braverman was right to resign, but Rishi Sunak's reappointed her because she paid the price for her mistake. But the other thing we need to be clear about, the cabinet we have is a unity cabinet. He is getting people in from across the broad church of the Conservative Party. And actually, that's the best way of governing, to be able to get people from different points of view in your cabinet to have those robust discussions. And they're your lieutenants to go out and sell it to those different members of the party. The Conservative Party needs to be united now. And Rishi Sunak is doing that. And look, up in Scotland, the Scottish Conservatives, and I'm maybe talking a little out of turn, we were really happy in our meetings. We were skipping out of our meeting. We've all got smiles on our faces because we have a leader that we are all united behind, and we are all very happy with Rishi Sunak.
Dr. Sandesh Gulhane, Shadow Health Secretary for Scotland, thank you very much for speaking to us this morning. It is 9:15. You were watching live pictures from Downing Street there as Nadeem Zahawi entered the building, number 10, for that first cabinet meeting this morning.
But as we've been hearing, how is he going to deal with the union? Well, in the headlines today, the new Prime Minister has met with on the phone, the ministers of Scotland and Wales. In talks with Nicola Sturgeon and Mark Drakeford, Sunak is said to have emphasised the UK's shared challenges, with Sturgeon concluding, as we've just been hearing, that the talks have been constructive.
Around 7 in 10 NHS trusts are failing to meet their targets for cancer referrals. In England, the current maximum wait time for a hospital appointment for suspected cancer is 2 weeks. NHS England says 93% of patients should be seen within this time frame, but the latest data shows this target is routinely not being met.
Northern Ireland businesses are facing what they've described as a tipping point, with 1 in 5 reportedly struggling. The president of the Northern Ireland Chamber has called this week pivotal in ending Stormont's political stagnation. The Northern Ireland secretary's warned he'll call an assembly election if Stormont is not restored by Friday.
It is 9:16. Coming up, we'll be speaking to the woman who went from working for Mick Jagger as a nanny to being a tour manager for The Who and the Rolling Stones. Classic career ladder.
Don't miss it, that's next.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
On radio,
And online.
we're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News. Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
It's 9:20. Welcome back to breakfast here on GB News. Now, Mick Jagger's known all over the world for his famous London accent, but according to a new book, Mick is more Mockney than Cockney.
His children's former nanny turned tour manager Sally Arnold says the Rolling Stones frontman is very well spoken at home. And she joins us now to give us more revelations about life on the road. Very good to see you this morning, Sally. And your new book, which I've got here, Rock and Roll Nanny.
Yes.
Is that true about Mick?
It's with tour managing, it's like nannying overgrown kids, quite honestly. It really is.
So let's start at the beginning of the story. You trained as a Norland nurse, the nanny, the cream of the crop of nannies.
No, we are Norland nurses.
So,
that's the official title.
Okay. But then you assumed you'd be with a family that would have some significant income if they can afford a nanny of that sort of calibre. You weren't expecting that family, presumably?
Well, it was just coincidence. I happened to be living in Paris at the time, in between jobs, with a boyfriend, and we went to a party, and we met Mick and Bianca Jagger. Mick had had a previous Norland nanny with Marianne Faithfull for her son. So he had written to Norland asking for another one, saying, my wife is expecting a baby. So he showed me the letter. Norland had written back to him saying, we'd like to recommend a nurse called Sally Arnold, and we're trying to find her. And he said, look, it's fate. You've got to come and work for us.
And you met at a party in Paris?
Yes.
Yeah, as you do.
Well, my boyfriend was quite a famous film producer.
Oh, I see.
Okay, so you were kind of mixing in those circles, but still, it must have been something to be asked. Did you say yes there and then?
No. I've never been a fan of the Stones. I've never possessed an album of the Stones.
Did you tell him that?
Probably, I don't know. My passion is classical music.
Oh,
I don't think you can work in rock and roll as a fan. I really don't.
So you then said yes. So what was that
eventually
like,
I said
being part
yes.
of the fabric of the family, really?
Well, it was just like any other family. Honestly, they're just normal, ordinary people.
Yeah.
I'd said yes, so I rushed back to London or to England to sort out, my things, get my uniform for a start. And then I flew back to stay in a l'hotel. And I brought Jade out of the hospital. There was a newspaper picture of me carrying Mick Jagger's first baby out of the hospital. And we lived in l'hotel for about a week or so. Then we moved into Nathalie Delon's apartment. Then we moved down to the south of France. And this is with a few weeks old baby.
Oh, my gosh.
And, of course, with all the stuff that goes with it, we had no disposable nappies.
No.
It was all terry toweling nappies and muslin nappies and heavy bottles and, that kind of thing. And we flew down to the south of France, where the band were making Exile on Main Street, and which, of course, is infamous now with Keith and Nellcote and all. But I never saw any of the drugs or anything then. I was just the nanny.
You're looking after Bianca Jagger and
well, I'm looking after the baby.
And the baby,
And I'm on the top floor in this beautiful chateau. And it was wonderful. And then we moved to Los Angeles. And again, this long flight with a three-week-old baby, is quite tough. Yeah. And we ended up staying in a hotel again. Then we moved to a house, at last, where we could be a bit more settled.
Yeah.
And Jade was the most beautiful little baby. I only looked after Jade. Earlier on, you said mixed children, just Jade.
Just Jade, okay.
Yes.
But then you kind of did a switch because you ended up being tour manager.
Well, I left the Jaggers really because Jade was getting too fond of me, and Norland always taught us, move on if the baby's... Because I was with her 24 hours a day. So I came back to England, and I was actually doing PR for classical musicians at the time. PR didn't really exist in those days. Neither did rock and roll, really. This was the early days of rock and roll, so I actually do write about the history of rock and roll, the early days of touring, and there's an appendix about the technical side, how all the crews came from the theatre, for example, because there was no rock and roll. The Carpenters, the sound and the lighting people. So so Mick Jagger's assistant phoned me, come and work for us. I said, what? Why me? I'm a nanny. And he said, because all the guys like you and all the wives trust you.
Perfect.
But you must be thinking, do I have the skills to do this? I mean, my skill set's not...
I completely busked it. I had no idea. I had done a secretarial course, but I didn't. But that was a blessing in a way, because I just used my common sense. And in fact, Heather Daltrey, Roger Daltrey's wife, praised me. She said, thank you. You're doing things that nobody's ever done before. I would give the wives and girlfriends itineraries.
Well, probably you had a different perspective.
Yeah.
It's been really brilliant to meet you. Thank you so much for coming in, Sally. From rock and roll nanny to tour manager, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So that is almost it from us today.
I'm going to be back tomorrow at 6 o'clock in the morning, and if you were watching yesterday, you'll know Andrew Pearce is going to be behind the desk with me, so that will be a bit of a roller coaster and I'm sure a riot. But next, don't go anywhere, Tom Harwood is here with you for the briefing.
Good morning, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest broadcast from the Met Office. Wednesday, sunny spells, scattered showers, blustery winds, but very mild for the time of year. Looking at the pressure pattern, and low pressure still dominates our weather as we move through the next few days, drawing in warm air from the near continent, but tightly packed isobars indicate quite brisk winds at times, particularly over the next 24 hours. So a gusty start to the day. Wednesday morning, sunny spells, scattered showers pushing their way north and eastwards, but it should slowly become a bit drier as we head through the morning. There will be a few scattered showers around, perhaps heavy at times, but most places staying dry. A blustery afternoon though, winds still gusting around 40-45 miles an hour around some western coasts. But a southerly direction with those winds means another warm day, 15, 16, 17 in the north, 18 to 20 Celsius across southern parts. So exceptionally mild for the time of year. Through into the evening, we'll see a few showers around, plenty of clear spells initially. Still very windy across the far northwest of Scotland, outbreaks of rain here. And then overnight, we'll see thicker clouds, some patchy rain starting to push northwards. This will stop the temperatures from dropping too low. Again, 12 to 16 Celsius for many. The average should be around 6 or 7, so a warm night to come. Thursday morning, quite a cloudy start, perhaps some sunny spells for Northern Ireland, southern Scotland initially, but patchy cloud and rain will push its way northwards through the day. The wind should ease as the day goes on, perhaps still a little blustery around the coast. And there will be some drier, brighter interludes at times, particularly across the south and the east. And where we see any spells of sunshine, it will lift temperatures into the low 20s, 21 Celsius possible, but mild for everyone, 15 to 17 Celsius, normally 14 or 15 as a high at this time of the year. Stays similar as we move towards the end of the week into the weekend, further blustery rain at times, and temperatures staying on the mild side. See you again soon.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christie's. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
On Mark Dolan Tonight, we have a simple plan, which is to inform, stimulate and entertain in equal measure. It's all about getting your opinions on the national television airwaves. I love